Chapter 153. Mao Mu and Tang Tong left happily after they got the job. Before they left, the two of them each got a few boxes of silver. This was the working capital that Yang Chendong gave them. Without money, it would be difficult to do anything in this world. When the two of them left, they naturally patted their chests and promised that they would do a good job. As for Qian Sengbeo's death, they followed Yang Chendong's words and said that he was searching the Yang family manor. He said that he did not see any new firearms and was looking for them. As long as the news could be delayed for half a day, Yang Chendong could naturally do a lot of things. Mao Mu and Tang Tong left happily. Hu Yen, Xiao Yin, and the other girls also walked from the back hall to the side hall. They all looked at Yang Chendong with happy eyes. Except for seventh sister Yang Duo, the other girls' eyes were shining. They looked like they couldn't wait to throw themselves into Dong Shuai's arms and be comforted. After so many days without a woman by his side, Yang Chendong's body also had needs. But he knew that there were too many things that needed to be done now. He would have to wait until night to talk about love. He could only suppress the impulse in his heart and smiled at the girls. You can rest assured. This young master is very good. I didn't get hurt at all. Later, when the situation stabilizes, I will talk to you one by one. For now, young master, Yang San is here. He is waiting in your study. Tiger's Mane walked into the side hall at the right time. His appearance helped Yang Chendong out of the situation and also found a suitable excuse for temporarily leaving. Okay. This young master will go right away. After Yang Chendong finished speaking to Tiger's Mane, he showed an apologetic smile to the girls. Then he got up and went to Hu Yan's side. He reached out and gently stroked her slender jade hand. Thank you for your hard work. Having her little hand grabbed by Yang Chendong in front of everyone, Hu Yan's little heart had long failed to live up to her expectations and was beating rapidly. Her little face was blushing and her head was almost buried in her neck. She didn't even know when Yang Chendong left. She only remembered that Xiao Yin and the other girls came to her side and laughed at her for a while, making her even more embarrassed. In the study, Yang San rushed back from the capital after learning that the young master had returned safely. At the same time, he brought more detailed information about the capital. Flipping through page after page of accurate information obtained by the Security Bureau, Yang Chendong had a clearer understanding of the situation in the capital. Jining had indeed served several emperors. Once she gained power, her methods were very impressive. In an extremely short period of time, she had roped in many old officials for her use. From the looks of it, once Ingzong returned to the court, the situation would become even more complicated. Among all the information, there was one that caught Yang Chendong's attention. That was that the eunuch Xing En, who was serving Empress Qian and had followed Empress Dowager Sun and led the harem, had actually reached an agreement with Jining. This was also thanks to the Security Bureau being willing to spend money to obtain such important information. However, even Mao Mu probably didn't know about this information. Thinking about how Mao Mu, who did not know, might enter the palace to contact Xing En and discuss his meeting with Empress Qian, Yang Chendong's expression changed. He decisively decided to change his previous plan. He looked at Yang San and asked, "Let me ask you, is it possible to contact Empress Qian without anyone noticing?" After some thought, Yang San gave Yang Chendong an answer. "It's possible. We bribed one of the Empress Palace maids, but if we do this, the spies we've spent so much money on will be exposed. It's fine. If they're exposed, they're exposed. In the future, we'll just spend money to plant more spies. How about this? Immediately get in touch with that palace maid and then..." Mao Mu excitedly returned to the capital and entered the imperial palace. Just as Yang Chendong had guessed, he went to find Xing En, the chief eunuch serving the empress. As the chief eunuch serving the empress, Xing En had 40 eunuchs under his direct command, and there were countless eunuchs under these 40 eunuchs. Unlike the eunuchs serving the emperor, Xing En's authority was mainly in the harem. If the empress had too much power, then the chief eunuch in the harem could be on par with some of the chief eunuchs serving the emperor. From how Ingzong allowed Xing En and Jining to assist him on this expedition, one could see his status. However, because Empress Qian wasn't keen on power, he wasn't as awe-inspiring as Jining. Even so, Other eunuchs couldn't meet him just because they wanted to. Fortunately, Mao Mu was originally the eunuch in charge of the ceremony directorate. In addition, he had spent a lot of money to send a message to Xing'an, allowing the two to meet. So it's Eunuch Mao. But why aren't you working in the ceremony directorate? Why have you come to this duke's place? They met, but Xing'an's attitude wasn't good. He spoke in a condescending tone. Eunuch Xing, this lowly one has come to discuss something important with you. Please dismiss your attendance. Mao Mu saw that there were two other eunuchs in the room and spoke carefully. Xing'an was about to bring a cup of tea to his mouth when he heard this and was startled. He carefully looked at Mao Mu and saw that he wasn't faking it. He thought that Mao Mu wouldn't dare to harm him here, so he lazily waved his hand, leaving only the two of them in the room. Now that there were no outsiders, Xing'an put down his cup and said, "Eunuch Mao, I hope that you truly do have something important to discuss with me." "Of course." "Eunuch Xing, to tell you the truth, this lowly one has just received an important piece of information. Ingzong hasn't died." After approaching Xing'an's ear, Mao Mu told him the information he got from Yang Chendong. Originally, Xing'an's expression was calm as usual, but after hearing this, his expression immediately changed greatly. He looked at Mao Mu with shock in his eyes. What did you say?" "Ingzong is still alive, and he's heading toward the capital," Mao Mu said in an excited voice, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. "Where did you get this information?" Xing'an's face was red, but he didn't know if it was because he was excited or for some other reason. Mao Mu didn't think too much at this moment, nor did he know that Xing'an had already reached an agreement with Jining. One of them was in the imperial court while the other was in the harem. Both of them minded their own business. He thought that Xing'an had this expression because he was happy, so he said, "I can't say where it came from yet. Someone is a vanguard sent back by Ingzong. He wants to meet with the Empress first, and Eunuch Xing needs to arrange it." Hearing that the vanguard was sent back, Xing'an's eyes flickered continuously. His somewhat gloomy eyes emitted a sinister glint. "All right, I will personally arrange this matter. Just tell me when he might enter the palace." Mao Mu had come happily and left satisfied. Xing'an's last few words were about this matter. He would definitely tell the Empress his role in this matter. In this way, his meteoric rise was just around the corner. After Mao Mu left, Xing'an hurriedly left the harem and went straight to Jin Ying's office. But what he didn't know was that just as he left, two palace maids left the Empress's palace together. Xing'an's sudden arrival naturally attracted Jin Ying's attention. Currently, there was still a pile of matters to deal with in the imperial court. He really didn't want to have any disputes with Xing'an right now. Of course, once he grasped the overall situation, no one knew what he would do. In the secret room, Xing'an told Jin Ying the news he got from Mao Mu. As expected, it gave her a big fright. "Eunuch Xing, this matter can't be taken as a joke. General Shiheng said that Ingzong and hundreds of officials died in the battle, and his body has been found. How could there be another Ingzong?" Jin Ying thought of everything that Shiheng reported in the imperial court that day, and said in a doubtful tone, "Yes, I don't really believe it either, but Mao Mu said it with certainty. Otherwise, Eunuch Jin can capture Mao Mu and ask him." Xing'an also wasn't too sure, so he wanted to capture the eunuch who told them the news and torture him. Then he would have no choice but to say it. After hearing this, Jin Ying was a bit tempted, but then she shook her head. "No rush. If we capture Mao Mu now, I'm afraid that the so-called vanguard won't dare to appear rashly. Let's do it like this. Everything will go according to the plan you discussed before. Once the vanguard appears, we'll capture him and then interrogate him about whether Ingzong is still alive. If he's lying to us, then it's no big deal. But if he's alive, then we'll put him under house arrest. When the time comes, we'll inform Daizong. This will be a great merit. When that time comes, will we be left out of the benefits?" Good. Eunuch Jin's thoughts are thorough. Thinking about how he could use this opportunity to make a good contribution in front of the new emperor, Xing'an's face was filled with excitement. Although it was true that he was the head eunuch by Empress Chen's side, the emperor had already been replaced, and the empress would be replaced sooner or later. When that time came, he would have to make plans as early as possible. This was also why he took the initiative to tell Jin Ing this matter. This was to pave the way for future matters. Mao Mu was still waiting. When the time came, he would bring Yang Chendong to meet with Empress Chen in private. But before the main person appeared, a young eunuch appeared first. "Eunuch Mao, the sixth young master has a message for you. Immediately leave the palace with me." "Who are you?" Mao Mu asked warily when he saw that the young eunuch was unfamiliar. "Eunuch Jin, don't worry about who I am. All of this was arranged by the sixth young master. He said that what you did has been exposed. Soon, a great disaster will befall you. Come with me now." The eunuch who came also had an anxious look on his face. He was taking a huge risk by doing this. If Yang San had not found him and said that he was willing to pay 2,000 taels of silver for him to make this trip, then he definitely would not have appeared here. If it had been any other excuse to find him, Mao Mu might not have left with him. But the young eunuch mentioned the sixth young master. That meant that not many people knew that the sixth young master was still alive. This matter was filled with more credibility. "All right, I'll go with you." Chapter 154. Yang Family Manor. A carriage arrived outside the manor and entered the manor without any inspection. As soon as it stopped, Hu Yen, Yang Duo, and Xiao Yin hurriedly came up to greet it. However, when the curtains were opened, only 2 women in palace-maid attire were revealed. Hu Yen, Yang Duo, Xiao Yin greets the empress. After seeing the appearance of one of the palace maids, the 3 immediately bowed. "There's no need to be so polite. Where is the Eastern commander?" Empress Qian's face was filled with anxiety. After greeting the 3 women, she directly asked for Yang Chendong's location. "He is. The young master is in the main hall waiting for the empress. Because he has some urgent matters to attend to, he couldn't come to greet you." Xiao Yin explained for Yang Chendong. "No matter. I'll have to trouble you 3 to lead the way." Empress Qian didn't care whether Yang Chendong came to greet her or not. What she cared about was the news the palace maids told her. It was that Ingzong wasn't dead. Just this one sentence was enough for her to take any risk and meet anyone. Speaking of this Empress Qian, she was truly a good woman. She wasn't greedy for money or power. She truly loved Zhu Qizhen wholeheartedly and saw him as her husband, not some emperor or monarch. History recorded that Ingzong was captured by the Walla during the Tumu Rebellion. In order to bring Ingzong back, Qian used up all of her wealth to redeem Ingzong. She lived frugally and cried all day long, praying to the gods to protect Ingzong's safe return. When she was tired, she would lie down on the ground, crippling one leg and blinding one eye from crying. When Ming Ingzong ascended the throne, Qian was honored as the Empress Dowager. After Ingzong returned, she and her husband were imprisoned in the southern palace for 7 years, relying on each other for survival. In the 8th year of Jingtai, 1457, Ingzong was restored and Qian was reinstated as the empress. In the 8th year of Tianshun, 1464, Emperor Ingzong passed away. His posthumous edict read, "After Empress Qian lives for 10,000 years, she shall be buried with Zhen." After Emperor Ingzong ascended the throne, he honored her as the Empress Dowager and gave her the insignia of CIE. It was precisely because he already knew this that Yang Chendong dared to inform Empress Qian that Ingzong was still alive, and not Empress Dowager Sunday. This was because the Security Bureau had already sent news that Empress Dowager's son was currently under strict protection by Jin Ing. It was likely that she would not be able to see her at all. Anyone who met the Empress Dowager in private would be arrested without question. In the main hall, Yang Chendong was listening to Tiger's man's report and the movements of the embroidered uniform guards. Yang Chendong knew that it was only a matter of time before the news of his return leaked out. It would take at most 1 day, or at most half a day for someone to point the finger at him. How to strengthen his strength in this period of time became the most important problem. This was also the reason why he let Tang Tong go. He was also gambling. He was gambling that this person would be loyal to Emperor Ingzong and fight for a future. From the information from the Security Bureau, This person was indeed working hard. He had already contacted many embroidered uniform guards Chenhu and Baihu. However, at the same time, he had also caused quite a commotion. Jining probably already knew about it. Arrange for Bai Zhua to lead the Ghost Shadow Sniper team out of the manor to provide support. Remember, this is not the time to kill, but to warn. Yang Chendong quickly made a decision and prepared for the arrival of Tang Tong and the others. Yes, Tiger's man replied and prepared to make the arrangements. However, before he left, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Young master, Hu Zhongning is also the embroidered uniform guard's guardian. Why didn't you inform him to come help the emperor?" "Forget it. The situation is unclear now. It's better not to let the Hu family get involved in this mess." Yang Chendong shook his head decisively. Of course, he had considered his future father-in-law. However, he could support Emperor Ingzong because he had the means to protect himself. However, the Hu family was different. Moreover, they were in the capital. If Emperor Ingzong got angry and wanted to punish the Hu family, even he couldn't do anything. Since the young master had already made plans, Tiger's man naturally wouldn't ask any more questions. After agreeing, he turned and left. Just as Tiger's man left, Empress Qin, dressed as a palace maid, came to the main hall. It had to be said that the empress was the empress. Even though she was dressed in palace maid attire, it was still difficult to hide her noble aura. In addition, she was indeed very beautiful and young. Her appearance actually made Yang Chendong's eyes light up. The surprise only lasted for a moment. Yang Chendong quickly considered everyone's identity. He immediately knelt on the ground and said, "This subject pays respects to the empress. No need to be so polite. Yang Chendong, you said that Emperor Ingzong is still alive. Do you have any evidence?" Empress Qin's face was anxious. Her eyes were like limpid autumn water, expressing her current mood. "Yes, please take a look." As Yang Chendong replied, he took out the secret letter written by Zhu Qizhen and handed it to Empress Qin. She received the dense letter with trembling hands. When she opened it and saw the familiar words, Empress Qin couldn't help but cry. This long-awaited handwritten letter was enough to prove that Emperor Ingzong was still alive. For a woman like her, this was the greatest joy. The secret letter had originally been written to Empress Qin. It recorded Emperor Ingzong's recent situation, especially how Yang Chendong had performed a great service and how he had protected Zhu Qizhen to safely escape from the Tumu Castle. Now, he had been conferred the title of Count of Loyalty and Courage, a trustworthy person. No matter what the situation in the capital was like, this person was trustworthy. He hoped that Empress Qin and Empress Dowager Sun would cooperate with the Count of Loyalty and Courage. At the end, he wrote that in a few days, he would return to the capital under the protection of the officials. At that time, it would be time for husband and wife to be reunited. Emperor Ingzong was indeed fine and would soon return to the capital. This allowed the large stone hanging in Empress Qin's heart to be put down. She tightly grasped the letter in her hand. When she looked at Yang Chendong, she was about to kneel on the ground to express her gratitude. "Empress, you must not do this." Yang Chendong had long been prepared for this. Everything he had done could not be resolved with a single kneel. It would be better to leave this kneel so that Emperor Ingzong and Empress Qin could continue to express their gratitude. With Yang Chendong's shout, Hu Yen, Chao Yin, and the other girls came over to help Empress Qin up. Being supported by the girls, Empress Qin knew that kneeling to express her gratitude would not do. Empress Qin excitedly said, "Count of Loyalty and Courage, Emperor Ingzong told me to cooperate with you in all matters. What do you think this empress can do? Stay here for the time being. I won't hide it from you. I'm afraid that someone already knows that I've returned and that Emperor Ingzong is still alive. They're probably looking for you right now, so it's safer for you to stay here." Yang Chendong thought about how Jin Ing and Eunuch Xing and would probably be very disappointed that he had not gone to the imperial palace according to the previous agreement. Looking for me? Who are they? What do they want? Although Empress Qin was pure and kind, it did not mean that she was not scheming. From Yang Chendong's words, she had already guessed something. At this point, there was no need to hide some things. Yang Chendong said, The ones looking for you should be Xing'an and eunuch Jining. They know that Emperor Ingzong has returned and want to capture you to force the emperor to hold back. What? Xing'an also betrayed me? Hearing this, Empress Qian's face was filled with disappointment. She had originally thought that Xing'an had followed her for many years and had always thought of her, so he was a trustworthy person. However, it seemed that there were no such things as eternal friends. There were only eternal benefits. In the imperial palace, the appointed time had arrived. Not only had the mysterious vanguard not appeared, but even Mao Mu had disappeared. Jining and Xing'an were both shocked. Xing'an suddenly cried out, "Not good, we might have been tricked. Quick, come with me to the imperial palace to see if the empress is still there." Xing'an's reaction wasn't slow, but Yang Chundong had changed his plans long ago. How could he have predicted this? By the time they returned to the Empress chambers, Empress Qian had truly disappeared. For a moment, the two eunuchs slapped their knees in hatred, hating themselves for being so careless. At this moment, another eunuch came to report that the embroidered uniform guard had important matters to report. Qianhu Tangtong was currently holding a meeting with the other Qianhu and Baihu, and it was clear that he intended to leave the capital. How rebellious! Let's go and see what these people are up to. When Jining heard that even the embroidered uniform guard was beginning to disobey her, she was instantly furious. These series of events had already proven that Emperor Ingzong was still alive. Otherwise, what was the point of setting up such a large game of chess? Jining sensed that the situation was about to spiral out of control, so she hastily left the Empress chambers and ran into an agent of the embroidered uniform guard. While they were still some distance away, the agent anxiously said, "Eunuch Jin, your subordinate has already investigated. Nearly 1,000 embroidered uniform guards have gone to the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the city." The Yang clan manor? Yang Chundong? He's actually still alive. When Jining heard this, she suddenly had a feeling of realization. She had been speculating about which vanguard Emperor Ingzong would send back to the capital. For this matter, she had already arranged for all the soldiers guarding the city to interrogate anyone who had come from outside, but they had found nothing. But if this person was Yang Chundong, then everything made sense. This person had never entered the capital, so how could she find him? Good, very good. Jining was not angry. On the contrary, she was rather happy. She had been afraid that she wouldn't be able to find this troublemaker. As long as this person was found, the matter would be easy to handle. She just needed to capture this person or directly kill him, severing Emperor Ingzong's foundation. Then she would have rendered a great service to Daizong. Come, gather 3,000 embroidered uniform guards and pursue them out of the city. We must exterminate Tang Tong and the other rebels. Not mentioning Yang Chundong was part of Jin Ying's selfishness. If she could suppress the news that this person had returned to the capital and that Emperor Ingzong was still alive, then it was best to do so. Following Jin Ying's command, the embroidered uniform guards became busy. Mobilizing 3,000 men in one go was impossible even if one did not want to be known by outsiders. Such a large movement quickly reached the ears of Chao Jixiang, the number 1 eunuch in the ceremony directorate. Chapter 155. Chao Jixiang was the first of Wang Zhen's students. In the first year of Zhangtong, 1436, the court sent an army to Luchuan to suppress Si Renfa. Chao Jixiang served as an army supervisor. In the 9th year of Zhangtong, 1444, Chao Jixiang participated in a punitive expedition against Wulianga. Together with Duke Chang Zhu Yong and eunuch Lu Yong, he sent out troops. In the 13th year of Zhangtong, 1448, he went to Fujian with Marquis Ning Yang Chun, Mao to suppress the peasant uprising led by Deng Maoqi. He supervised firearms with eunuch Wang Jin. Every time he sent out troops, he would select some brave generals and nimble soldiers to serve under him. After he returned, he would raise them at home. Thus, there were many weapons and warriors hidden in his home. Because of his good performance, he was promoted to the position of first eunuch in charge of the ceremony directorate. In name, he held the right to mobilize the brocade guard in the East faction. However, this was only in name. In reality, regardless of whether it was during Wang Zhen's reign or Jin Ying's current reign, he was only in name. The only people he could mobilize were the 500 warriors hidden in his home. When this eunuch, who was nominally in charge of the brocade guard, heard the news of a large mobilization, he immediately sent people to investigate. He had always been very honest. Even though everyone knew that he was Wang Zhen's man, Jin Ying did not immediately act against him. However, this did not mean that he was honest. He just lacked an opportunity to rise up. This powerful eunuch of the Ming dynasty in history, who had even participated in a rebellion, finally felt restless. Seeing that Jin Ying had sucked up to Zhu Qiyu and become a powerful eunuch, Chao Jixiang did not immediately act. Instead, he waited. In his eyes, the situation in the court was not very clear. At the very least, the Walla people who had defeated Zhu Qizhen were a big threat. Before they were defeated, no decision could be considered completely correct. Since he could become a powerful eunuch, he had to be very scheming. It was during this period of waiting that things changed. He learned from his trusted aide that Ying Zong might still be alive and that he had chosen Yang Qindong as the vanguard to return to the army. This news, for Chao Jixiang, who had been silent all this time, was very exciting. At the same time that he saw the light, his entire person became restless. Opportunities were called opportunities because they were rare and had to be grasped. Chao Jixiang was prepared to seize this opportunity. He immediately called over his nephew Chao Qin, his adopted son Chao Xian, and Chao Duo, and told them that he was prepared to help Yang Qindong. Chao Jixiang had always been known for his shrewdness, and there were even people who called him the youngest old fox. He was referring to the fact that even though he was young, he had great foresight. Since he had made such a decision, his subordinates would naturally raise both hands in approval. After reaching a consensus, more embroidered uniform guards and East Faction guards started to gather. He had been the director of the East Factory for several years. Although it was only in name, the truth was that Wang Zhen had always been in charge of the East Factory. He also had to listen to Wang Zhen's instructions when making important decisions. But that didn't mean that Chao Jixiang didn't do anything. On the contrary, he had been secretly building his own system. Now that Wang Zhen was no longer around and the heavy stone on his head was gone, it was time for Chao Jixiang to show his strength. Soon, no less than 3,000 people from the Eastern Faction and the brocade guards gathered and headed to the Yangjia village under Chao Jixiang's personal lead. Outside the Yangjia village, it was bustling with noise and excitement. Tang Tong led 1,000 embroidered uniform guards in front, while the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Han Ji, led 3,000 embroidered uniform guards in pursuit. Behind them were the 3,000 embroidered uniform guards and East Faction guards led by Chao Jixiang himself. They were like orioles following closely behind. The soldiers of the warden's office guarding the south gate of the Great Ming Dynasty looked at the large group of embroidered uniform guards and East Faction guards walking out of the city. They guessed that something big must have happened, but they couldn't imagine what kind of big thing it was with their intelligence. On the road 5 li outside the Yangjia village, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team hidden in the dense forest on both sides of the road were ready. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive and give them a thunderous blow. This place would become the place for them to show their fangs once again. Yang Si stood alone in the middle of the road. He could already see the figures of Tang Tong and the others in the distance, but he still didn't panic. It was as if the army of 1,000 didn't exist. It wasn't until Tang Tong ran in front of him that he waved his hand and said, "Count Zhongdan has given the order. Warriors who are loyal to Yingzong stand behind me. As for the others who want to invade the Yang family manor, kill them." Yang Si's voice wasn't very loud, but it had a kind of deterrent force. Tang Tong and the others consciously stood behind him and formed a formation. Just as they finished doing this, a group of people came from the distance. They were all wearing flying robes and holding embroidered spring sabers. Their faces were murderous. "Stop right there." When Yang Si saw that the distance between him and the embroidered uniform guards was already about 60 paces, he suddenly let out a loud roar. The sound of his roar rang out, causing Han Ji-xian, who was leading the charge, to involuntarily rein in his horse and stop. "Who are you?" You dare to block the path of my embroidered uniform guards. Do you know that you have committed a capital offense? Han Ji's eyes were full of murderous intent as he glared at Yang Si. In front of us is the private manor of Count Zhongdan. No one is allowed to enter without permission. Otherwise, it is a capital offense. I want to ask you, how many heads do you have? Are you tired of living? Facing the angry Han Ji, Yang Si responded with a sneer. His eyes were full of contempt and disdain. When Han Ji saw Yang Si's imposing manner, he, who was originally filled with anger, immediately turned hostile. Brat, I am now under Eunuch Jin's orders to capture these traitorous remnants of the embroidered uniform guard. If you know what's good for you, dismount from your horse and kneel on the ground and beg for surrender. Otherwise, don't blame this official for being merciless. Lightly shaking his head, Yang Si narrowed his eyes into slits and didn't say anything else. The warning had already been issued. If the other party still insisted on doing things their own way, the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad would show them what the end of the road was and what despair was. Seeing that Yang Si didn't say anything else, Han Ji's imposing manner couldn't help but rise. He turned his head to the left and right and said, "Go! Capture Tang Tong and the leaders of the rebellion. If anyone dares to resist, kill them without mercy and wipe out their families." Yes. A few of the embroidered uniform guards who were swept by Han Ji's gaze immediately puffed out their chests and raised their heads. They rode their horses forward as if they couldn't bear to look at them. At the same time, their right hands pressed on the embroidered spring sabers at their waists. They looked like they would kill anyone who dared to resist. Puff, puff, puff. The snipers with silencers opened fire under Bai's was command. Without the slightest movement, for embroidered uniform guards who were riding forward fell from their horses. When they landed on the ground, each of them widened their eyes. Their faces were filled with unwillingness and confusion. The 4 officers of the embroidered uniform guard were suddenly killed on the spot without any warning. This frightened the others. For a moment, the embroidered uniform guards who were advancing stopped in their tracks. They looked around as if they were looking for something. There's no need to look. If anyone is looking, I guarantee that the next one to die will be him. In order to increase the sense of mystery, as well as to deal a fatal blow to the enemy's morale, Yang Si's shout rang out. Some of the officers who were obedient immediately stopped their actions of inquiring about the situation. However, there were also 2 who didn't know what was good for them. They didn't take Yang Si's words seriously at all. They were still looking around to find the reason for their comrades' deaths. However, in the next second, the 2 of them became corpses. They fell from their horses with a spear between their eyebrows. 6 people died in a row. This sudden turn of events caused the embroidered uniform guards to cry out in alarm. Death wasn't scary, but to die without knowing why or even who killed you, this became very scary. Han Ji also had a physical body. With the help of Jin Ying's power and influence, such a person would naturally cherish his life more than ordinary people. Glory and wealth were right in front of him. If he died without enjoying it, how unjust would that be? Seeing that 6 of his subordinates had died in succession, he really couldn't find the reason. His expression changed again and again, and he said to the left and right, "Go, you guys rush over. This official wants to see who is causing mischief in the dark." Han Ji didn't know the reason. Naturally, he couldn't go back and report to Jin Ying. Whether it was for his own position or to give his superiors an explanation, he needed more people to test the danger and find the real killer move. The embroidered uniform guards who were called out immediately changed their expressions. There were only 2 kinds of people who knew that they would die but still wanted to go forward. One was someone with strong faith. The other was someone who was stupid. For these embroidered uniform guards, faith was nothing. In their eyes, power and money were more important. To be elected to the embroidered uniform guards, they naturally weren't stupid. If there were no benefits, why would they be willing to take the risk? At that moment, several people looked at Han Ji with pleading eyes. Their pleading was very obvious. What? Is no one going to listen to my orders? Let me tell you, if you rush forward and die in battle, you will die for the country. Your family will be compensated. On the other hand, If you disobey, not only will you die, your family will also be implicated. Choose for yourselves. The angry Han Ji wouldn't reason with his subordinates. He directly made his position clear. To outsiders, the embroidered uniform guards were very powerful. They could even capture important officials. However, at the same time, their internal rules were very strict. So strict that even the slightest mistake could result in death. Since Han Ji had already threatened them, they had no other choice. After a few people looked at each other, their eyes filled with determination. Their hands shook the reins of their horses and they leaped into the ranks. After a few more almost inaudible gunshots, none of the embroidered uniform guards were lucky enough to survive. They all fell off their horses and died. Chapter 156. A few more people died, but they still didn't find anything out of the ordinary. While Han Ji's expression changed drastically, he realized that the embroidered uniform guards around him were intentionally keeping their distance from him. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were afraid of being called out and sent to their deaths. In the dense forest beside the road, the members of the Ghost Sniper team were very excited. They liked the feeling of taking someone's head from 1,000 meters away. The moment the bullet whizzed out, the blood in their bodies seemed to boil. Now, they just hoped that Han Ji wouldn't be scared and give them a chance to kill to their heart's content. Would Han Ji be scared? The answer was yes. Seeing 10 of his brothers die in front of him for no reason, he was scared out of his wits. At this moment, he wanted nothing more than to turn around and leave. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know how to reply to Jining, he would have disappeared long ago. In contrast, Tang Tong and the others were in high spirits. Although they didn't know why the enemy died as soon as they moved, they were sure that the person who did it in the dark was one of their own. With such a strong external aid, what else did they have to be afraid of? Now, they just had to watch the other party advance and die one by one. At the same time, many of the brocade guards who were hesitant about whether to follow Tang Tong were glad that they made the right choice. Report. Just as Han Ji was in a dilemma and didn't know what to do next, a cavalry scout came from behind. As soon as he appeared, he got off his horse and knelt on the ground. Report to Master Han. Chao Jixiang is leading 3,000 brocade guards to surround us. Chao Jixiang. Hearing that someone was coming to surround them, Han Ji didn't feel nervous. On the contrary, he was very happy in his heart. He was originally worried that he wouldn't be able to report back without a reason. Now, Chao Jixiang's arrival gave him enough of an excuse. Not good, they're here to deal with us. So, everyone listen to my order, retreat. Han Ji reacted as if he was facing a great enemy and shouted in horror. Then he urged his horse back. The other embroidered uniform guards who didn't want to move forward for a long time finally had a suitable reason and excuse. They all followed behind Han Ji and ran away. 3,000 brocade guards really came with a strong momentum and left with flying sand. In the blink of an eye, they had all retreated, leaving only 10 gradually cold corpses on the ground. Where is Tang Tong? Send people to deal with these corpses. At the same time, send 100 people to guard this place. No one is allowed to take a step forward without orders. Otherwise, these people will become their role models. Yang Si issued the order loudly, then rode his horse back to the Yang village. He wanted to tell the young master about Chao Jixiang's arrival and ask him to make a decision. Chao Jixiang led the warriors under his command and the embroidered uniform guards that he could recruit, a total of more than 3,000 people, out of the southern part of the city and headed towards the Yang family manor. Once the army left the capital, it began to slow down. In order to show his importance, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he wanted to wait for Han Ji and Tang Tong to kill each other. Then, he would appear as the one who collected the corpses. In this way, he would be able to show his importance. The army proceeded at an unhurried pace, but after traveling only 5 li, the scouts sent back news that Han Ji and the 3,000 embroidered uniform guards had retreated and chosen a different route to return to the capital. Retreated? Could it be that they didn't fight with Tang Tong? Or did they not catch up at all? Chao Jixiang's face was filled with confusion and doubt. This was different from what he had imagined. We caught up with them, but we don't know why the two sides didn't fight. After they discovered our existence, they quickly left. The scout also had a puzzled look on his face, but he still told the truth about what he had heard. Chao Jixiang, who didn't know the reason, knew that the opportunity to watch the tigers fight was gone. However, he wasn't discouraged. There were benefits to not fighting. For example, Tang Tong and the others were safe. This was also a good thing. He believed that he had the ability to devour this force. This way, he would be able to strengthen himself without suffering heavy losses. Alright, since Han Ji and the others have left, let's make a trip to the Yang family manor. I have heard of this East Marshal for a long time. Yang family manor. Chao Jixiang. This is indeed a character. Yang Chundong listened to Yang Xi's report and had a calm smile on his face. How could he not know of this eunuch who had eventually gone on the path of rebellion in history? It was only because of Wang Zhen's Jining that he didn't stand out so much. With the passage of time, this person had finally stepped onto the stage of history. Based on his performance, he had even had the opportunity to shine earlier than in history. Pass down the message. When he arrives, bring him to see this uncle. Yang Chindong, who had already bared his fangs, no longer had to be so careful in everything like before the wooden castle. Even when facing Chao Jixiang, he still had a sense of superiority. Yes. Yang Xi cupped his fists in acknowledgement and left. Yang Chindong was left alone to think about what to do next. He could no longer hide the fact that he was the vanguard of the Ying sect. A dynasty was about to have two emperors. He really didn't know what choice everyone would make. And what choice would the acting sect master Zhu Qiyu make? Han Ji led the 3,000 embroidered uniform guards back to the capital in a panic. As soon as they entered the inner city, they headed straight for the imperial palace. In the imperial palace, Jining had already told the newly ascended acting sect master, Zhu Qiyu, about the fact that Yang Chundong had returned to the capital as the vanguard of the Ying sect. She also told him about how he had already taken Empress Qin out of the palace. Zhu Qiyu's expression became somewhat panicked. His throne was not inherited from anyone, nor was it passed down orally like the other emperors. It was completely pushed to this position by the ministers who forced him to do something beyond his ability. He had originally thought that his brother Zhu Qizhen had died on the battlefield. That way his throne would be rightful. But he had never imagined that he was still alive. What was the point of his throne then? Wasn't he being suspected of usurping the throne? Thinking of this, Zhu Qiyu tried to say to Jining, "Since royal brother is still alive, when he returns, we can give the throne back to him." Zhu Qiyu's answer disappointed Jining greatly. At the same time, she was shocked. If this was the truth, she could imagine what his fate would be. When the Ying sect left, he had told her to handle court affairs with another eunuch, Xing En, the minister of appointments, Wang Ji, and the emperor's son-in-law, Jiao Jing. But now, not only had he taken over the other three, he had also recommended Zhu Qiyu to be the emperor. If he was investigated, the result was obvious. Not only would she die, but everyone related to her would also not be able to escape. She absolutely could not allow Zhu Qizhen to ascend the throne again. After Jining made up her mind, she looked at Zhu Qiyu and said in a threatening tone, "Your Majesty, do you think this is borrowing something? If you don't need it, you can return it. This is the throne. Whether you are willing or not, you are now the acting sect master of the great Ming dynasty. Based on this, do you think that if he returns, he will spare you?" What should I do? Zhu Qiyu heard Jin Ying's words and immediately panicked. Zhu Qiyu was not a shrewd person. In terms of scheming, he was far from his brother, Zhu Qizhen. He was straightforward and had a low EQ. Sometimes, he didn't even know how to be flexible. In history, he had even openly bribed the officials for his son to become the crown prince. This could be seen. Now that he heard Jin Ying's threatening words, he was naturally shocked. Speaking of which, no one wanted to die. Zhu Qiyu was naturally the same. Especially after being the emperor for a few days, the people below were very polite to him. No matter what he wanted to do, they would obey. This feeling made him feel a little smug. Now, he had to give up all of his privileges and even bear the risk of losing his life. If it were anyone else, they would be afraid and reluctant to do so. Jining saw that Zhu Qiu was a little scared and knew that her words had worked. While she was happy, she spoke her opinion and meaning. Your Majesty, no matter how you obtained the throne, there is no doubt that it is legitimate. You were recommended by the officials and approved by Empress Dowager Sunday. Then you are the current emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. There is no doubt about this. If anyone has doubts, then they should be arrested and killed as an example to others. Arrested and killed? Zhu Qiu repeated Jin Ying's words. That's right, capture them and kill them. This way, no one will dare to say bad things about you. As for the matter of Emperor Ingzong returning to the court, I think we can make him the retired emperor just like Li Yuan during the Tang Dynasty. Wasn't he revered as the retired emperor by his second son, Li Shimin? In later generations, because Li Shimin was close to the government and loved the people, he was still revered as Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty. This is the example set by our predecessors. Jining was not an ignorant and incompetent person. When she spoke of history, she was clear and logical. After Jin Ying's advice, Zhu Qiu's expression became much better. He did not want to die. In order to live on and even live a better life, he could only let his imperial brother suffer. All right, then we will do as you say and honor my imperial brother as the retired emperor. However, I don't know how the officials will react. Will they support me? After all, I have only been the emperor for a few days. My imperial brother has been the emperor for more than 10 years. It's fine. As long as we give enough benefits, these officials will make the right choice, Jining said confidently. Now that he had great power and Zhu Qiu's support, he did not believe that anyone would dare to have any objections. Of course, he still prioritized roping in those who could be roped in. Ever since the Han Dynasty revered Confucianism, the disciples of Confucianism were a privileged class and were high above the masses. They monopolized education and officialdom. They were decadent and fell. They were conservative and stubborn. However, they had great power. Even the emperor had to give face to Confucianism. Chapter 157. This was also why Zhu Qiu was so worried about the reactions of the officials. The power they represented was often greater than that of the imperial power. Jin Ying naturally understood this principle. But it was precisely because he knew the reason that he was even more confident that as long as he gave them enough benefits, he would have no need to worry about the support of these officials. And among these ministers, there was one person who was very important, and that was Yang Qindong. Since Zhu Qiu had sent him back as the vanguard, this meant that he was trusted. If he could also support Zhu Qiu's claim to be the rightful emperor, Zhu Qiu would truly be unable to make a comeback. After deciding on a plan with the emperor, Jining left the main hall and ran into the embroidered uniform guard commander Han Ji, who was like an ant on a hot pan. When he saw his master come out, Han Ji dropped to his knees. This subordinate was incompetent and was unable to capture Tang Gui and the others. In addition, Chao Jixiang led a large group of embroidered uniform guards to cut off this subordinate's retreat. This subordinate was worried that the army would be lost, so I retreated first. But I have already sent people to the various city gates and warned them that without your highness's order, no embroidered uniform guard is allowed to enter the capital. What's going on? How many men did Chao Jixiang lead? So many things had happened in such a short time, and Jin Ying's expression changed again and again. He had originally believed that with his superior numbers, killing Tang Tong and capturing Yang Qindong was just a matter of time. Once Yang Shima became a prisoner, he would no longer have a chance to negotiate with him. At that time, he would be able to do whatever he wanted. He had never imagined that things would turn out to be completely different. It's like this. Han Ji wiped the sweat from his forehead and explained everything he had seen and heard to Jining. When he heard that 10 embroidered uniform guards had been killed without a single sign and that no one had been able to find out who had done it, Jining knew that it had to have been the work of those advanced firearms. He also understood that the report that Qian Sengbao had taken the Yang clan and was searching for firearms was false. By the time he had received the news, Qian Sengbao had probably already been dead. It seemed that the Yang clan truly could not be underestimated. With the advanced firearms, the Yangjia village was already impregnable. Now that they had Chao Jixiang's support, it was likely that they would become powerful. It seemed that this Yang Shima was really difficult to deal with. It would be impossible to defeat him without spending a bit of capital. All right, I got it. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to His Majesty. You lead the embroidered uniform guards and wait for my orders. After Jining finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards the main hall of the palace. She found Zhu Qiu again. My dear minister, is there something wrong? Seeing Jining appear, for some reason, Zhu Qizhen felt a burst of panic in his heart. Your Majesty, things are indeed a little unexpected. That Yang Qindong, who was just conferred the title of loyal and courageous count by Ingzong, has a very powerful firearm in his hands. It can easily take a person's life within a few hundred steps. Just now, 10 embroidered uniform guards died in the hands of this firearm. As soon as Jining saw Zhu Qizhen, she made the situation sound very serious. If she didn't do that, she wouldn't be able to get his attention, and it wouldn't be easy to talk about the following conditions. There's such a thing? What should we do? Zhu Qiu started to panic again. He really didn't expect that he would be so nervous as emperor. Don't worry, I'll say the same thing. Your Majesty, as long as we give the loyal and courageous count enough benefits, it will be very easy for him to recognize you as emperor. Now, it's up to us to see how much capital we can spend, Jining asked tentatively. Although he said that he had great power now, when it came to conferring titles, it wasn't something that a powerful official like him could decide. All right, as long as he's willing to recognize me as emperor, I'll confer him a high official. My dear minister, what do you think will satisfy him? In order to become emperor, Zhu Qiu's life would no longer be threatened. At this moment, he was also willing to spend a lot of capital. With Zhu Qiu's attitude, Jining breathed a sigh of relief. Your Majesty, since Ingzong can confer him the title of count, why can't we confer him the title of marquis? As long as we show enough importance, I'm sure that Yang Qindong will be indescribably grateful. At that time, he'll naturally follow your lead. When that time comes, Ingzong will really have no one to rely on. Confer the title of marquis? That's fine. I'll leave this matter to you, my dear minister. Zhu Qiu only hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Although there was a saying in the Great Ming Dynasty that one couldn't be conferred a title without military merit, since imperial brother Zhu Qizhen had already conferred the title of count, it shouldn't be too much for him to promote him. On the official road 5 li away from Yang Manor, Chao Jixiang rushed over with his army of 3,000. What he saw was a man dressed as a servant riding on a tall horse blocking the road. Behind him were 100 embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes. The formation was placed in front of him, but it was completely unwelcoming. There wasn't the slightest bit of welcome. This caused Chao Jixiang to be dissatisfied. His nephew, Chao Exen, was flustered and exasperated as he shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you recognize Lord Chao?" During Wang Zhan's reign, Chao Jixiang was the first eunuch in charge of the ceremony directorate. In name, he was in charge of the Eastern faction and the embroidered uniform guards. His subordinates naturally recognized him. However, after witnessing Han Ji's defeat, they were filled with confidence in their loyalty. Even if their immediate superior appeared, no one would feel afraid. Chao Xian roared, only to be met with silence. After a while, seeing that no one spoke, Yang Si chuckled and said, "What's wrong? Brother, are you trying to scare someone?" *CK. Who are you? Chao Xian felt that he had lost face. He pulled out his embroidered spring saber and pointed it at Yang Si. The threat was obvious. Is no one going to take care of you spouting shit? Yang Si's expression also darkened. He looked at the leader, Chao Jixiang, implying that his subordinate was speaking rudely, but as the master, he was not going to take care of him? Facing Yang Si's gaze, Chao Jixiang acted as if he did not see it. He raised his head slightly and looked at the sky above, as if he was sighing about the good weather today. Ding! A crisp and deafening sound suddenly rang out. The embroidered spring saber that was pulled out was struck by the spear and fell to the ground. Chao Xian, who was holding the saber, also staggered and almost fell off the horse. "Who is it?" The sudden change caused all the embroidered uniform guards to be extremely alarmed. The foster sons of Chao Xian and Chao Duo even stood on the left and right of Chao Jixiang, and they looked around with the intention of clearly seeing where the threat came from. "There is no need to look. If I want your little lives, it is merely a matter of raising my hand." The corner of Yang Xi's mouth curled as he coldly snorted when he saw Chao Jixiang and the rest acting as if they were facing a great enemy. When his voice fell, it also attracted the laughter of the 100 embroidered uniform guards behind him, including Tang Tong. The mocking laughter entered Chao Xian's ears, causing his face to flush red. He felt that he had lost all face. In a fit of anger, he wanted to charge forward. However, he had just taken a step forward when the warhorse under him was suddenly startled. It then fell to the ground with a plop. Chao Xian, who was unprepared, was thrown to the ground. When he fell off the horse, he rolled a few times. His body was covered in dust, and his face was pale as he stood foolishly on the spot. "Do you see? If I wanted to take your life, you would have been a dead man just now. It was only because Count Zhongguo thought that you were all wholeheartedly serving the public that he showed mercy. However, if there is anyone who refuses to accept this and wants to provoke me, then I won't be polite in the slightest. If you don't believe me, you can try." Pointing at Chao Xian, who was crawling up from the ground, Yang Xi's words were no longer merciless. This time, there was no one who didn't believe him. Although there were still some people who didn't accept this, they suppressed the impulse in their hearts. This was because they knew that if they didn't act properly, it was very likely that they would end up dead on the spot. Chao Jixiang, who was originally calm and waiting for Yang Qindong to appear, was no longer as relaxed as before. When he looked at Yang Xi again, he first pushed away Chao Xian and Chao Duo who were protecting him. Then, he mounted on his horse and cupped his hands together. "This brother? I am Chao Jixiang. I have something to discuss with Count Zhongguo. Please pass on the message." "Humph. Wouldn't it have been fine if you had done this earlier? All right, wait for me to report to Count Zhongguo." Yang Xi had long expected this kind of result. He cupped his hands together and spoke with a trace of politeness. Turning around, Yang Xi didn't immediately head straight for the Yang clan manor. Instead, he said to the leader, Tang Tong, "Look carefully. If anyone doesn't listen to my advice and recklessly charges forward, you only need to shout loudly and there will naturally be people who will take their lives." After saying this, Yang Xi swaggered off, leaving Chao Jixiang and the others with no place to vent their anger. No matter what, Chao Jixiang was the eunuch in charge of the ceremony directorate and was ranked first. Moreover, he also had the status of the East Faction factory manager. Normally, when he met any minister, the other party would be polite. How could he have encountered this kind of situation? Even if Yang Chandong had already been conferred a noble title and became Count Zhongguo, there were still many people in the Great Ming Dynasty who had a noble title. How could he dare to be so impolite to the East Faction factory manager? It was just that the situation was stronger than the person. Although in terms of status, he was a level higher than the other party, the killing intent that came out of nowhere really scared Chao Jixiang and the others. Yang Xi told them to wait obediently, so they could only continue to wait. In the Yang clan manor, Yang Chandong was in the study drawing for the women. Because there were too many women squeezing in, it actually felt a little crowded. Hu Yan, Xiao Yin, Yang Duo, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang were all in the study, waiting in line for Yang Chandong to draw. A strange atmosphere lingered in the study, giving Yang Chandong a kind of scalp-tingling feeling. Chapter 158. Among the 5 women, Hu Yan and Yang Duo were in the same group. Their gazes were the most direct, sweeping over Xiao Yin and the other 2 women from time to time, giving people the feeling that they were scanning their bodies. Because of their backgrounds, Hu Yan and Yang Duo had more in common. In their opinion, it wasn't that a man couldn't marry a concubine, but he should at least respect the first wife, right? Obviously, Hu Yan should play the role of the first wife. Xiao Yin and Madame Shui were in the same group. They were all people who had served Yang Chandong before, and they had the same experience of serving him. Naturally, their hearts were closer. However, when they faced Hu Yan's gaze, they still felt a little unnatural. Perhaps they also knew that with their backgrounds, it was impossible for them to be the first wife of the sixth young master. To be able to become a concubine was already a blessing from their ancestors. The last of the 5 women, Madame Xiang, felt uncomfortable standing there. She was extremely careful when she spoke and walked. Her background wasn't good, and she hadn't been recognized by Yang Qindong. Logically speaking, she shouldn't stay here. However, after experiencing the previous incident, she didn't want to let go of this relationship. So what if she was looked down upon? In short, this time she definitely wouldn't back down. Even if she had to refuse, she would do it on Dong Shuai's bed. It was said that 3 women were enough to make a show, but now there were 5 women. 4 of them had feelings for him, and one of them was his biological sister. Yang Qindong didn't know what to do. Although he was still holding a brush, he was no longer in the mood to paint. Cough! With a light cough, Yang Qindong decided to change this situation. Some things needed to be made clear. Otherwise, he didn't know how he would live in the future. What he wanted was to enjoy the happiness of having multiple wives, not to look at other people's faces and consider their feelings. His cough immediately attracted the attention of the 5 women. Almost at the same time, several cups of tea were handed to him. Seeing all the women fawning over him, Yang Qindong couldn't help but let out a long sigh and said, "All right, I understand your intentions. Now I'll give everyone a choice. If you want to leave my woman, you can do so. Not only will I not pursue the matter, I'll even give her a large sum of money. Can be considered as ending our fate." "That's right, 7th sister, can you leave first?" Yang Qindong's intention was to discuss, but his tone was extremely firm. This caused 7th sister Yang Duo, who originally wanted to stay here to watch the show, to feel a chill run down her spine. She actually involuntarily agreed and then left the study. After Yang Duo left, the 4 women left behind all liked Yang Qindong, and Dong Shuai also liked them. At this moment, the 5 of them were staring at each other, but none of them moved. "All right, since no one wants to leave, then this young master has to say some rules." Yang Qindong began to set the family rules. As the saying goes, nothing can be accomplished without rules. If he didn't make things clear in advance, if something happened in the future, it wouldn't be easy to come up with a solution. Since you've chosen to be Yang Qindong's woman, then the first thing you need to do is not to be jealous. If anyone can't accept this, then you can also leave now. My promise just now still counts. As he spoke, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on the 4 women one by one. After seeing that the 4 women didn't have any reaction, Yang Qindong said, "Then it can be considered that you've agreed. From now on, if anyone takes any extreme actions because of jealousy, then sorry, the result will be that you'll be kicked out of the Yang family village and never allowed to take a step back. Second, after becoming my woman, you need to pay attention to unity. Because you'll be sisters in the future, if you get along well, this young master will naturally be happy. If I have to see you use all kinds of methods to fight, then I'll be very unhappy. The result will also be that I'll be kicked out of the Yang family and never allowed to enter again. Third, you can have your own business. As long as you're willing to do it, this young master will support you and provide you with enough money. I'll also send people to protect you. In other words, I'll give you enough freedom. But there's one thing, you're not allowed to be with other men behind my back. If I find out, it won't be as simple as kicking you out of the Yang family. This is my bottom line, and I hope you'll remember it in your hearts. Fourth, as long as it's money you earn, you can spend it however you want. I won't ask. Even if it's not earned by you, you can spend it if it's my money and I won't ask. But if anyone wants to scheme against my money, use it to do bad things, or even support those who oppose me, then I'm sorry, the consequences are not something you can imagine or even bear. Fifth, after becoming my woman, you don't need to care too much about status. I'll treat you equally. As for how you'll call each other sisters, that's up to you. I won't interfere in these matters. But I also don't want anyone to bully the weak and think that they're better than others. That's something I won't allow. Alright, that's all for the above 5 points. I finished my requests. If you have any other requests, you can raise them now. But after today, once I walk out of the study, don't talk about it casually in private. Do you understand? Yang Chendong pretended to have a cold face as he raised the 5 requests. Then, his face turned from gloomy to sunny and was full of smiles. When it came to feelings, Yang Chendong had to admit that he was a little selfish. For women, it could be said that each had her own merits. He didn't want to let go of any of them, but he also didn't want to hurt any of them, so he had to say the ugly words first. Yang Chendong changed from a cold face to a smiling face, causing the 4 women to feel relieved. Then they began to express their opinions one by one. The first to speak was Hu Yen. Although none of the women said anything, everyone knew that Hu Yen was very likely to become Yang Chendong's wife in terms of background and knowledge. This was determined by the environment, and it was very difficult for Yang Chendong to change it. Not to mention, Hu Yen knew that Yang Chendong was likely to have an accident, but she still came to Yang Chendong and claimed to be the daughter-in-law of the Yang family. Just this point alone was not comparable to ordinary women. If she became the first wife, others would not have any objection. Hu Yen was the first to stand up. Her eyes fell on Yang Chendong and she said with shyness, "I abide by the 5 requirements of Dong Shui. At the same time, I also have to criticize myself. In fact, I didn't mean to be rude to my sisters. It's all my 7th sister who taught you. Alas, she suffered in the Wang family. She was afraid that you would suffer like this, so she did this. I can understand, but don't do it again. You can't do this in the future. I'm not that Wang Go. By the way, you can call me Lu Lang in the future." Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He had already learned from Yang Si and Yang Lu that before he came back, the women got along very well. For such a sudden change, it must be 7th sister who played a role in it. Sure enough, Yang Chendong directly pointed out the problem. Hu Yen blushed and said, "I really can't hide anything from Lu Lang. Haha, Lu Lang is a good name. Of course, only my women are qualified to call me that. Haha, okay. Come over and let Lu Lang hug you." Yang Chendong laughed and ignored Xiao Yin and the other women who wanted to say something. He first put Hu Yen, who was the closest to him, on his lap. Since he had made the request and no one had any objections, there was no need to listen to the attitudes of these women. Wouldn't it be better to see everything through their actions in the future? It was Hu Yan's first time being so close to Yang Chendong, and she immediately blushed. However, when Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Shui also came to Yang Chendong's side and huddled together, her shyness quickly disappeared and she blended into the warm atmosphere. Outside the study, Yang Si had been there for a while, but when he saw Miss Seven guarding here and not allowing anyone to enter, he could only stand aside and wait respectfully. It was not until about an hour later that Yang Chendong's voice came from inside. "Yang Si, you're back, right? Come in and talk." "Yes." Yang Si quickly responded, then lowered his head and entered the study. As soon as he entered, he said without even raising his head, "Young master." The Ghost Shadow Sniper team frightened Chao Jixiang. They are now 5 miles away from the manor, waiting for young master to meet them. Well done. How about this? Let Chao Jixiang enter the manor and allow him to bring 2 embroidered uniform guards with him. Remember, 2 people at most. If he doesn't want to, he can go back to where he came from. Yang Chendong waved his hand, not treating Chao Jixiang as an important person at all. Understood. Yang Si responded, then turned and left. He could only bring 2 attendants. Whether Chao Jixiang would agree or not was not within his scope of consideration. He only needed to listen to the young master's orders. At this time, Chao Jixiang was already impatient. After more than an hour, he still did not see Yang Si return. If he rode a horse from here to the Yang Manor, it would only take a moment for him to go back and forth. However, after such a long time, he still did not see Chu Li, which made him feel like he was being played. However, although he was impatient, he still could not leave. After all, if he wanted to contact Ing Zong, he could only find Yang Chendong. Thus, even if he was angry, he did not show it on his face. His nephew, Chao Xian, had already patted off all the dust on his body. He felt embarrassed as he stared at Tang Tong and the 100 embroidered uniform guards opposite him. If eyes could kill, Jie and the others would have died many times over. Uncle, why don't we kill our way into the manor and capture Yang Chendong alive? I don't believe that he won't tell us where Ingzong is. Chao Xian, who wanted to regain his face, saw that Yang Si was not coming back, so he impatiently suggested to Chao Jixiang. Chapter 159. Upon hearing his words, Chao Xian and Chao Duo nodded in agreement. Clearly, they had the same thoughts. Charge over. Have you forgotten how you fell off your horse? Chao Jixiang glared at Chao Xian. He had just patted off the dust on his body, yet he had already forgotten about the pain. Did he even have a brain? Chao Xian was naturally indignant after being reprimanded. However, when he thought about how he fell off his horse for no reason, he immediately suppressed the impulse in his heart. He couldn't help but look to the sides of the road. However, there was only dense forest everywhere, and he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Time slowly passed. Finally, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. Yang Si arrived on horseback. Chao Jixiang heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he saw that only Yang Si had arrived and that Yang Chendong wasn't with him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. What is the meaning of this? Does he not want to meet me? At this moment, Yang Si arrived before the two armies and stopped in front of Tang Tong and the others. After which, Yang Si announced loudly, "The Count has ordered for eunuch Chao to bring 2 attendants and follow me into the manor for a chat." What? Upon hearing that only 2 people were allowed in, Chao Xian and the others immediately flew into a frenzy. The 2 foster sons, Chao Xian and Chao Duo, even tried to dissuade him. This was a trap, and they hoped that their foster father wouldn't fall for it. At this moment, Chao Jixiang was also furious. This Yang Chendong didn't take him seriously at all. He clearly knew his identity, yet he didn't come out to greet him personally. Instead, he allowed him to bring only 2 attendants into the manor. This was clearly a slap to his face. Of course, Chao Jixiang didn't think that Yang Chendong was trying to harm him. Firstly, there wasn't any conflict of interest between them. Secondly, if Wang Chong really wanted to harm him, all he had to do was use the same method he used on Chao Xian, and he wouldn't be able to avoid it. Being looked down on like this, Chao Jixiang really wanted to turn around and leave in anger. However, if he were to leave, he would really become a barren tree. Putting aside the fact that he wouldn't be able to return to the capital, he wouldn't be able to meet Ingzong either. At that time, he would definitely be labeled as a rebel. Sigh. Forget it. When one is under someone else's roof, one has no choice but to lower one's head. However, Yang Chendong, for humiliating me like this today, this duke will get his revenge sooner or later. Chao Jixiang decided to lower his head. He turned around and pointed to 2 good fighters from the East faction and said, "You 2 come with me. The rest of you stay here. Remember, no matter what happens, no matter how long you wait, stay here obediently. If anyone dares to make a decision on their own, I will not let them off easily when I return." His gaze lingered on the trio for a while before Chao Jixiang tidied up his attire and rode over to Yang Si with his 2 servants. "Brother, please lead the way." No problem, please." Seeing that Tang Tong was being polite, Yang Si naturally returned the greeting. Then, the 4 of them walked past Tang Tong and the others, heading straight to the Yang clan manor. Not long after Chao Jixiang left, another team arrived behind his team. The leaders were Jin Ing, Han Ji, and the others. Jin Ing seemed to cherish her life. She had brought 3,000 men with her this time. Although both sides were embroidered uniform guards, in reality, they belonged to 2 different camps. The moment they met, an atmosphere of mutual hostility filled the air. "Do not attack without orders. I am here to pay my respects to Count Zhongdan. Please make way." Jin Ing walked at the front. On her left and right were the martial arts experts from the East faction. This was to ensure that if anyone tried to harm her, she could react immediately. Since Jin Ing did not take the initiative to attack, Chao Jixiang and the others naturally would not look for trouble. Everyone was wary of each other and allowed them to come before the 2 armies. With Yang Si gone, Tang Tong became the person in charge and was pushed forward. The moment he stepped forward, his aura was greatly reduced in front of Jin Ing. He actually cupped his fists and bowed, saying, "Greetings, eunuch Jin. Oh, I remember you. You are Tang Tong, Chen Hu of the embroidered uniform guards, right? Haha, how about this? I will have to trouble you to inform him that I have something important to discuss with Count Zhongdan." Jin Ying's face was full of smiles, as if she and Tang Tong were old acquaintances. This was the first time Jin Ying respected him so much. For a moment, Tang Tong felt like he was floating. "All right, please wait for a moment, eunuch Jin. I will go to Yang village now." Thank you, thank you." As Jin Ying finished speaking, Tang Tong had already mounted his horse. He turned and galloped in the direction of Yang village. Yang Si brought Chao Jixiang and the others to the inner courtyard of Yang village. Yang Lu stood there. He raised his hand and blocked their way. "What are you doing?" Yang Lu's action caused one of the embroidered uniform guards to draw his spring-embroidered knife. But just as he drew his steel knife, he felt pain in his arm. Blood splattered. His right hand holding the knife had been hit by the first guard hidden on the roof of Yang village. The steel knife fell to the ground. The guard's pained cry rang out. "You have 3 breaths time to shut up. Otherwise, the next hit won't be your arm, but your head." Yang Lu reached out his right hand and gestured a pistol. He chuckled as he spoke to the embroidered uniform guard who dared to draw his knife. Although Yang Lu was smiling when he spoke, the content of his words was so terrifying that the embroidered uniform guard immediately shut his mouth. He allowed the pain to break out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to make the slightest sound. "That's more like it. Our count doesn't like to see people using weapons. So, it's best that you cooperate with the inspection. Come, raise your arms and take out your weapons." Yang Lu walked in front of Chao Jixiang with a twisted smile. Chao Jixiang knew that Yang Lu wanted to search him. Although he didn't have any weapons on him, this action was a form of contempt. This made him very unhappy. But since he was here, he had to abide by the rules. Especially since there was already an example in front of him, he didn't dare to play any tricks. Only after letting out an unhappy snort, he still cooperated with Yang Lu's inspection in the end. After searching for a while and not finding any dangerous items on him, Yang Lu nodded and spoke to Yang Si. "Fourth brother, I'll bring him in. No problem. I also need to keep an eye on the front in case anyone tries to play any tricks. As for these two, just stay here obediently. Remember, if you dare to do anything untoward, I guarantee that your heads will explode in the next second." After Yang Si agreed, he intimidated the 2 embroidered uniform guards who had followed him. Then, he mounted his horse and rushed out of the manor. Just as Yang Si rode out of the manor, he saw Tang Tong riding a horse towards him. "Stop. Why aren't you keeping an eye on the front? Why are you running into the manor?" Tang Tong was still a Chen Hu of the embroidered uniform guards and wasn't considered a member of the Yangxie's new army. Naturally, he couldn't enter the manor as he pleased. "Brother Yang Si, eunuch Jining is here. He's just 5 li away and says he wants to see the count." When Tang Tong saw Yang Si, he didn't know why he felt nervous. Perhaps he was worried that if he didn't perform well, something would fly out of nowhere and kill him. So what if he's here? What's there to be surprised about? Wait here first. I'll report this matter to the count. Yang Si, who was very dissatisfied with Tang Tong's performance, rolled his eyes and pointed to the ground. He meant to tell Tang Tong that he could go up to this point. If he wanted to go any further, he would be crossing the line. Tang Tong was an understanding person. He nodded repeatedly and almost raised his hand to swear that he wouldn't cross the line. Not far from the 2 of them, outside the Yang Manor, 900 embroidered uniform guards were eating with pots and pots. Since they had come to the Yang Manor, there was naturally plenty of good food and drink. They were really eating big pieces of meat and drinking big mouthfuls of wine. Even from a distance, a fragrant smell wafted over. This was the rule of the Yang Manor. As long as you weren't a member of the Yang Manor, no matter what your status was, you couldn't stay here without permission. This rule came into effect after Yang Chendong returned. In the side hall of the Yang family manor, Chao Jixiang saw Yang Chendong, who was dressed in green. Just like before the battle, he was wearing the most ordinary green clothes. When Yang Chendong walked out under the protection of Tiger's Mane, Chao Jixiang hurriedly stood up and said respectfully with a smile, "Greetings, Count Zhongdan. Eunuch Chao is too polite. Take a seat." Casually pointing to a chair, Yang Chendong sat down at the head of the table with a smile on his face. When Yang Chendong sat down, Chao Jixiang slowly sat down, giving off a feeling that he was following the rules. But the more he acted like this, the more Yang Chendong felt that this person wasn't simple, and the more cautious he became. After both parties sat down, Yang Chendong took the initiative to speak. "I believe Eunuch Chao is here to ask about Ingzong's whereabouts. This count can tell you that the emperor is fine. He eats well and sleeps well. He is on his way to the capital. It's just that." Hearing that Ingzong was fine, Chao Jixiang's face revealed a happy smile. Dai Zong had already put Jining in an important position, so it was impossible for him to put him in an important position. But with Ingzong, if Wang Jin died, he would have a chance to be promoted. But after hearing Yang Chendong's words, his originally smiling face became tense. But what does Count Zhongdan mean by just that? Sigh. With a long sigh, Yang Chendong pretended to bemoan the state of the universe and the fate of mankind, and said, "But now that there is an emperor in the capital, I really don't know what will happen to Ingzong when he returns." Yes. After hearing this, Chao Jixiang's face became much more unsightly. Now that there was a new substitute emperor, Zhu Qiyu, in the capital, why would Zhu Qizhen return at this time? It was impossible for there to be two emperors in a single dynasty. One of them was destined to leave the throne. Although Ingzong had been the emperor for a long time, Dai Zong now occupied the capital, controlled the army, and had the initiative. If they really fought, it was unknown who would win. Chapter 160. If Ingzong won, everything would be fine. But if he lost, wouldn't he be doomed as well? The stakes were too high. Human lives were at stake. Seeing Chao Jixiang nod his head in agreement, Yang Chendong asked, "Eunuch Chao, you are very familiar with the situation in the capital and the imperial court. Do you have any good ideas?" You really don't have any? As the saying goes, two tigers cannot live on one mountain. If the two tigers fight, one of them will be injured." Chao Jixiang gave an example, saying that they needed a war to solve the problem. No. After hearing Chao Jixiang's suggestion, Yang Chendong shook his head. "Eunuch Chao, since you have been in the capital for a long time and hold the power of the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard, you should know that Walla's army is approaching the capital. If there is an internal conflict in the imperial court at this time, it will only hurt those close to you and make your enemies happy. Then what should we do?" Thinking about the military intelligence he had just received, Walla's army had already broken through Baiyang Pass and Zijing Pass, and was currently attacking Juyong Pass. The gates to the capital were about to open, and if that was the case, the capital would be in danger. It was indeed not a good time to have internal strife. But in this situation, without confirming who the emperor was, how could they divide their forces to fight against Walla's army? Just as Chao Jixiang's face was filled with worry, Yang Si rushed in from outside. The moment he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground and respectfully said to Yang Chendong, "Young master, Eunuch Jining is here. He is waiting for you 5 li outside the Yang residence." "Oh, so fast. Haha. Please." After hearing this, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. It was clear that he had expected this. But after saying please, he did not forget to add to Yang Si, "Old rules, he can only bring 2 people to the residence. This uncle only wants to live the life of an ordinary person. I don't want to see an army coming. I will be afraid." "Yes." Yang Si nodded and then walked out of the room. When Chao Jixiang saw this, his heart was filled with disdain. "You have such powerful retainers. Are you afraid that others will send an army to attack you? What a joke." Of course, these were just thoughts in his heart. After knowing that Jining was coming, there were some things that needed to be said in advance. Originally, Chao Jixiang wanted to wait for the right time, but now he didn't dare to hide anything. Uncle Zhongdan, Jining has already pledged her loyalty to Dai Zong. You have saved Ing Zong, and you have done a great service. I believe that once Ing Zong ascends to the position, you will not be lacking in benefits. You have to think twice about your every move. Reconsider? Well, I've been thinking about it. Let me think about it. Yang Qindong kept nodding, as if he had heard Chao Jixiang's words. However, from that moment on, he actually stopped talking. Instead, he closed his eyes, giving off the feeling that he was thinking about something. However, he was actually waiting for Jin Ying's arrival. Only when she was here could the next step be carried out as he wished. Seeing that Yang Qindong was indeed reconsidering, Chao Jixiang suddenly became anxious. Uncle Zhongdan, no matter what, Ing Zong has been in power for more than 10 years. He is still very popular in the imperial court. Compared to Dai Zong, who has just ascended to the position, he has too many advantages. He should be the one to take charge. That's right, that's right. Eunuch Chao is right. Let me think about it carefully. Yang Qindong still didn't open his eyes. He kept nodding, giving off the feeling that he was really thinking hard. 5 miles away from the Yang Manor, Yang Si and Tang Tong rushed back. When it was said that Jining was allowed to enter the manor, but she could only bring 2 guards, Eunuch Jin didn't even show a trace of displeasure. Instead, he happily nodded and agreed. Then, he smiled and rode his horse to Yang Si's side. From this, it could be seen that Jining and Chao Jixiang were both astute people. Oftentimes, the more polite a person appeared on the surface, the harder it was to deal with them. Not long after, Jining appeared at the Yang Manor. When she entered the side hall, she saw Yang Qindong resting with his eyes closed. Chao Jixiang had an anxious expression on his face. Listening to the voice and looking at people's faces, Jin Ying's heart calmed down just from this discovery. If Yang Qindong had already made a decision, Chao Jixiang wouldn't be so anxious. Since that was the case, it meant that he still had a chance. It had to be said that Jining had indeed served 4 emperors. No, now it should be 5 emperors. Few people could compare to her decisiveness in doing things. Seeing that the situation was still uncertain, she reached into her clothes and took out an imperial edict with a golden dragon on it. At the same time, she shouted, "The imperial edict has arrived. Uncle Zhongdan, please accept it." I, Yang Qindong, accept the imperial edict. When he heard that it was an imperial edict, an undetectable joy flashed across Yang Qindong's eyes. He knew that Dai Zong was going to give him some benefits. He just didn't know what kind of conditions Dai Zong would give him. Yang Qindong knelt on the ground. Jining read aloud, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that Count Zhongdan Yang Qindong is young and promising. He is proficient in both martial arts and literature. He protected the retired emperor on the dangerous battlefield. His loyalty to the great Ming dynasty is witnessed by the heavens and earth. He is hereby conferred the title of Duke Zhongdan and the position of commander of the Brocade Guards." Emperor Zong of the Ming dynasty proclaims this. After Jining finished reading the imperial edict, she smiled and said to Yang Qindong, who was kneeling on the ground, "Marquis, please rise." The count had become the Marquis. Yang Qindong's lips curled into a faint smile. "Thank you, Eunuch Jin. You've worked hard. You're too kind. Compared to Marquis bravely saving the retired emperor, what I did pales in comparison." Jin Ying's eyes narrowed into slits. This was the second time he had mentioned the title of retired emperor. As soon as he finished speaking, Chao Jixiang shouted in protest, "Eunuch Jin, what are you doing? How did Emperor Ingzong become retired emperor? How come I didn't know about this? How dare you? This is an imperial edict from Emperor Daizong. Did he need to discuss it with you first?" Jining was not so amiable when facing Chao Jixiang. Whether it was in terms of seniority or power, the two of them were not on the same page. In the face of Jin Ying's rebuke, Chao Jixiang had no intention of backing down. In truth, from the moment he had led his warriors and the embroidered uniform guard out of the capital, he had already decided on his stance. Since he had already made his choice, Why would he be afraid of Jin Ying's angry rebuke? Chao Jixiang sneered. When Emperor Daizong took the throne, it was because Shi Heng reported that Emperor Ingzong was no longer around. But now that Emperor Ingzong is fine and will soon return to the capital, Emperor Daizong should take the initiative to abdicate. After all, his regent power was bestowed upon him by Emperor Ingzong. Oh? Emperor Ingzong is returning to the capital? Jining blinked several times at this news. She ignored Chao Jixiang and turned to Yang Chundong, who was receiving an imperial edict, and asked, Marquis, is this true? It's true. Yang Chundong had accepted benefits from Emperor Daizong, so he naturally had to express his gratitude. He immediately said, Eunuch Chao is correct. Emperor Ingzong is heading to the capital with Minister of War Kuang Yi, Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua, and other officials. HAA, Marquis was ordered by Emperor Ingzong to return to the capital first, so that he could report to everyone that he was safe. But he didn't expect Emperor Daizong to have already ascended the throne. In this case, once Emperor Ingzong returns to the capital, won't there be a country with two emperors? What should we do then? Yang Chundong directly laid out the problem in front of Jining and Chao Jixiang. His gaze continued to wander between the two of them. A country with two emperors. Whenever such a thing appeared in history, it would always be accompanied by fierce battles. How could a mountain contain two tigers? Not to mention, how could there be two voices in a country? If something were to happen, whose orders should they listen to? Jining and Chao Jixiang quickly thought of this problem, and for a moment, their faces turned extremely nasty. They felt like they had been stumped by reality. Based on the current situation, it was clear that no one would back down so easily. The result was likely to be a clash of swords and weapons. With a great enemy like Walla by their side, any internal strife would only benefit others. In the side chamber, the atmosphere became extremely tense. The three of them didn't speak for a long time, each with their heads lowered, thinking about their own matters. Yang Chundong also had his head lowered, but he wasn't thinking about anything. Instead, he was resting with his eyes closed. He had hurried on his journey and hadn't had a good rest since returning. He was indeed a little sleepy. It was precisely because he was sleepy that he began to snore softly. This was so clear in the silent side chamber, so out of place. Cough, cough. Jining and Chao Jixiang coughed softly at the same time. Using this method to wake Yang Chundong up, there was movement. Yang Chundong had indeed woken up. When he raised his head, he met Jining and Chao Jixiang's eyes. He smiled and said, What? Have the two of you come to a conclusion? If you have, then please leave. Marquis has been hurrying on the road for days. He is indeed too tired. After he finished speaking, Yang Chundong slowly stood up. From the looks of it, it was clear that he wanted to leave this place and find a big bed to have a good sleep. Yang Chundong wanted to leave. This made Jining and Chao Jixiang very anxious. They both knew that they couldn't make a decision on their own. If the other party was unwilling to give in, they wouldn't give in either. In the end, they would only meet in battle. This was an outcome that neither of them wanted to see, because no one could guarantee that they would be the victor. After thinking about it, he still needed Yang Chundong to be a partner or a middleman to give a balanced and reasonable way to deal with it. Since that was the case, how could they let him leave? At that moment, the two of them blocked Yang Chundong's path. Marquis, we can't come to a conclusion. Can you please show us the way? Chapter 161. You want me to lead the way? You trust Marquis that much? Yang Chundong was already familiar with his current identity. He spoke without missing the word ho. Jining and Chao Jixiang were not displeased at all. On the contrary, they both nodded solemnly with serious expressions. Ai, if that's the case, then Marquis will say a few words. As he spoke, Yang Chundong returned to his seat at the head of the table. All right, let's ask Marquis to say a few words. No matter what your decision is, Emperor Daizong will seriously consider it and thank you. Jining quickly expressed her determination. At the same time, she brought up Daizong's identity. Chao Jixiang naturally did not want to fall behind. He immediately said, "That's right. Marquis, please give us an idea. Emperor Ingzong was saved by you. I'm sure His Majesty will agree and be grateful for your decision." The two of them were equally matched. They both brought up the emperor behind them, reminding Yang Chendong that he had to treat them equally. Yang Chendong only smiled at the little tricks used by the two of them and did not expose them. He returned to his seat and took a sip of tea to moisten his throat. Then, he slowly said, "Emperor Daizong's intention is to make Emperor Ingzong the retired emperor, right?" "That's right." Jining nodded in response. "I'm sure Emperor Ingzong will not accept this. He's only in his early 20s. I'm sure no one would be willing to become the retired emperor." When Yang Chendong said this, he looked at Chao Jixiang and asked, "That's right. Ingzong was at the peak of the spring and autumn period. He could do a lot of things. How could he become the retired emperor?" Chao Jixiang also couldn't help but nod, praising Yang Chendong's words. "All right, I understand what you mean. Obviously, this title of retired emperor is not suitable. If we must do it this way, it is very likely that we will meet on the battlefield. When that time comes, the only thing that will be lost will be the vitality of my great Ming dynasty, and the ones who will die will be the warriors of the great Ming dynasty. But don't forget that Walla's army is on its way to the capital. Once it breaks through Jiuyong Pass, the gates to the capital will be wide open. At this time, we can't afford to be unstable. Otherwise, we'll be hurting our friends and rejoicing our enemies, right?" That's right. Jining and Chao Jixiang both nodded in agreement with Yang Chendong's analysis of the situation. "Yes, since we can't fight and we can't fight, then we can only negotiate. How about this? The acting great emperor doesn't need to talk about the retired great emperor. This will definitely not work." Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the cooperation of the two. This saved him a lot of effort. "That's right. Marquis is wise." Chao Jixiang could tell from these words that Yang Chendong was siding with Zhu Qizhen, so he hastily agreed. This made Jining, who was at the side, a little unhappy. "What's wrong? We just promoted you to Valiant Marquis, and you're not even speaking for the acting great emperor?" But before Jining could object, Yang Chendong turned to her and said, "The acting great emperor can't possibly abdicate the throne to Emperor Ingzong, who lost to the enemy on the battlefield, right?" When Yang Chendong said that Emperor Ingzong was a defeated emperor, Jining was extremely happy, and she immediately agreed. Yes. It's only Marquis who has sharp eyes that can see through everything." Haha. Yang Chendong only chuckled at this not-so-clever flattery, not minding it at all. Instead, he continued, "Then this matter is already extremely clear. Everyone has their own reasons, and both of you are emperors of the 9 and 5. Relying on the capital alone won't be enough to satisfy your needs. Why not shift your gaze elsewhere? Why must you stick to one place? The Great Ming doesn't just have one major city, the capital." What is Marquis' intention? When Jining and Chao Jixiang heard this, they were stunned. They did not understand what Yang Chendong meant. "Haha, this isn't Marquis' intention. The two of you asked me for advice, so I had no choice but to come up with this idea. Of course, this idea might not be very clever, but if eunuchs don't think it's appropriate, you can just pretend that Marquis didn't say anything." Yang Chendong chuckled, putting on a nonchalant expression. In fact, this result was within his expectations. In fact, he had already made preparations for this when Ingzong set out for the war. Yang Chendong had come up with the idea, but he didn't want to take the blame. Jining and Chao Jixiang were both shrewd people, so how could they not understand the meaning behind these words? The two of them immediately nodded. "Yes, we asked Marquis for the idea. None of this matter has anything to do with eunuch." "Very good. Since that's the case, I'll add a few words. Since the capital can only have one emperor, why can't Emperor Ingzong give up this place? For example, if you go to the capital of Nanjing, the climate there is pleasant, and it's no less prosperous than the capital. It already has other palaces and palaces. Truly is a place where dragons flourish." Under their gazes, Yang Chendong finally revealed the ultimate goal of his plan, which was to divide the great Ming dynasty into two. "Go to Nanjing?" Chao Jixiang's eyes widened. It seemed that this result was completely out of his expectations. It was also something that he had never thought of before. It wasn't just Chao Jixiang. Even Jining fell silent. Similarly, the result was somewhat out of his expectations. He had originally believed that as long as he could rope in Yang Qindong, he would be able to learn of Emperor Ingzong's whereabouts. Afterward, he would send an army to bring Emperor Emeritus back to the capital and place him under house arrest. But now it seemed that Yang Qindong would not betray Emperor Ingzong. Not only that, he even had the idea of allowing Emperor Ingzong to continue as emperor. Fortunately, he was not allowed to return to the capital, which could be considered as speaking on Dai Zong's behalf. Yang Qindong had proposed the plan, but whether or not they would do it was not up to him to decide. However, he believed that his idea would be the most perfect one after considering all the situations. Chao Jixiang fell silent as he mentally weighed the feasibility of this plan. Dai Zong was now emperor in the capital and wielded great power. If Emperor Ingzong returned, there was a high chance that he would be captured and then placed under house arrest with the title of Emperor Emeritus until he died. If this was the case, anyone who had pledged allegiance to Emperor Ingzong could easily imagine their fate. Since he had no confidence, he might as well go to Nanjing and proclaim himself emperor. Given that Emperor Ingzong had been emperor for so many years, he should be able to quickly accumulate a powerful force. At that time, he would have the choice of remaining in Nanjing or fighting his way back to the capital. In this way, Yang Qindong's plan could not be considered wrong. On the other end, Jining was also considering Yang Qindong's proposal. It was true that Dai Zong was emperor and that he controlled the capital. But his ascension to the throne had not been justified, and he had only been on the throne for such a short period of time. Who knew what those important officials in the capital were thinking? If they supported Emperor Ingzong, wouldn't Dai Zong's position be at risk? If that was the case, what sort of role would he be playing and where would he go? Speaking of which, even if Dai Zong won, he would probably be riddled with wounds, perhaps even greatly weakened. What strength would he have left to resist the Walla's army? And if he was ultimately defeated by the foreigners, he would not have a good end either. It was better to just let Emperor Ingzong proclaim himself emperor in Nanjing. As long as he developed well, there was no need to worry about the day when he could reunite the country. Dai Zong would have more time to prepare, and Jining would be able to obtain even more benefits. The two of them had different thoughts, but their final decision was the same. After some thought, Chao Jixiang made a temporary decision. Okay, I agree. This duke will do his best to persuade Emperor Ingzong, but there are still some conditions. For example, the families of Kuang Yi and the other important officials are still in the capital and need you to let them go. In addition, if other officials are willing to go with Emperor Ingzong, you are not allowed to stop them. Everything is up to them. This was a temporary decision because Chao Jixiang could not represent Emperor Ingzong. He could only act as a lobbyist. Jining had also made her decision. She felt that Chao Jixiang's conditions were reasonable, but she stated that she would have to go back and consult Dai Zong Emperor Zhu Qiyu before she could give a final answer. In front of Yang Qindong, the two of them discussed a few general issues, but they did not discuss the details. This was because they were both keenly aware that anything that was too detailed would end in the end. Both sides would have to send representatives for more detailed discussions before they could reach a conclusion. This included the territories under the jurisdiction of the two emperors. Yang Qindong was only responsible for the two of them. As for whether they succeeded or not, and what else they had to do after they succeeded, he would not interfere. By doing all this, he already had suspicions that he had exceeded his authority. He did not want to interfere in every matter and end up being hated by others. Although Jining had not learned of Ingzong's whereabouts from Yang Qindong, she had managed to protect Dai Zong's position and returned satisfied. She left Chao Jixiang alone in the side hall. He had to see Emperor Ingzong before he could do anything. Marquis will arrange for someone to lead you to Emperor Ingzong. You can do as you see fit. Oh right, when you leave, remember to bring Empress Qian with you. I think she will cooperate with you to do some things. Looking at Chao Jixiang, who was standing there with a longing expression, Yang Chundong left these words before he got up and left the side hall. Now that he had succeeded, he could finally have a good rest for a few days. Of course, some people might ask, why did Yang Chundong give up such a good opportunity to control the emperor and give it to Chao Jixiang when he already had actual control over Zhu Qizhen? This was where Yang Chundong was smart. Ming Zong had ascended to the throne, and Ing Zong was naturally weaker. In addition, Yang Chundong had played a balancing role in the middle. It could be seen that in the future, no matter who it was, it would be very difficult to have the great Ming dynasty alone. Since Ing Zong was no longer the one and only emperor whose words carried enormous weight, why did Yang Chundong want to hold him in his hands and make him the target of public criticism? With an emperor by his side, he would have to ask for instructions from time to time, and he would even have to kneel. How could it compare to the pleasure and satisfaction of being an independent third party? Chapter 162. Chao Jixiang had some ability. Once he developed, he wouldn't be too far off from Wang Jin. But it was precisely because he had the ability that he could better assist Zhu Qizhen. Otherwise, if he was an idiot, it wouldn't be long before he was eaten up by Jining. The sixth young master didn't want either side to become stronger. What he needed was balance. Only then could he show his importance. Yang Chundong would have more room to display his abilities. The two emperors kept each other in check, so he could be sandwiched between them and reap the benefits. Now that the matter is settled, the next step is to prepare for the war. That's right, is there any news from Crimson City? Yang Chundong returned to the study and looked at Tiger's Mane. They're already on their way to the capital. They're coming in small groups so that they won't attract attention. Tiger's Mane knew what Yang Chundong was asking about and respectfully replied. The sixth young master who had grown up with him was now Marquis. The young master wasn't even 20 yet, but his future was bright. Tiger's Mane wouldn't be a nobody if he followed such a master. All right, I understand. The young master is sleepy. If there's nothing important, don't call me. Yang Chundong waved his hand and walked toward the bedroom next to the study. Hu Yen, Chao Yin, and the others had been waiting there for a long time. Although they might not be able to do anything with them around, it was still better to be with beauties than with those incomplete eunuchs who only knew how to fight for power. On the road 5 li away from the Yang clan manor, the bustling scene had disappeared. After Jining and Chao Jixiang left, Tang Tong, who had stayed behind, was also taken away. Tang Tong had chosen to leave with Jining. This was Yang Chundong's intention. He didn't keep idle people here. Unless it was Yang Xie's personal army, he couldn't be at ease with anyone guarding the Yang family manor. As for who Tang Tong would choose to leave with, Yang Chundong didn't ask. Instead, he left the decision to himself. When Jining and Chao Jixiang had both extended an olive branch to him, he had ultimately chosen to return to the capital with Jining. His subordinates had all settled down in the capital, and if he were to go somewhere else, the morale of the army would be shaken. Jining had brought 3,000 embroidered uniform guards with her when she came. When she returned, she brought 4,000 men with her. As soon as he entered the capital, he went straight to the imperial city to ask Zhu Qiyu about his plans. In the inner hall of the palace, after Zhu Qiyu learned about Jin Ying's experience at Yangjia village, he frowned. A country divided into 2 emperors. Won't this cause the great Ming dynasty to be divided? No matter what, Zhu Qiyu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. He also valued the Zhu family's country very much. It was not unreasonable for him to have such thoughts. Jining didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to hold on to power. As for whether or not the country would be divided, that was a matter for the future. Your Majesty, this subject also knows that this is not a perfect plan, but I truly cannot think of a better one. Once Ing Zong returns to the capital, he will not allow himself to be captured without a fight. After all, he has been emperor for so many years, and many people are loyal to him. If he raises his arm and receives even more support, we might not even have a place to stay. It would be better to slow down for now. I trust that with your Majesty's benevolence, it won't be long before you have even more people sincerely submit to you. At that time, wouldn't it be very easy for the realm to fall into your Majesty's hands? Jining placed Zhu Qiyu in a very high position, her eyes brimming with confidence. These words spurred Zhu Qiyu on, filling him with confidence for the future. Fine, this is all we can do, but we still need to prevent even more officials from leaving with Ingzong. We will leave this matter to you. Jining patted his chest and promised, Your Majesty, be at ease. This subject will definitely not allow any more officials to leave the capital. This was a chance to prove himself. If he did a good job, Daizong would naturally think highly of him. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Hebei's Baoding Prefecture, a strategic town more than 300 li from the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. At this time, Zhu Qizhen was resting here under the protection of Yang Wu and Xiao Feng. Now that he was in Baoding Prefecture, he was able to obtain some news from the capital. When he heard that his younger brother, Zhu Qiyu, had ascended to the throne and taken the title of Emperor Jing, Zhu Qizhen's rage was easy to imagine. He had kindly allowed his brother to supervise the country, but now that he was gone, his brother had proclaimed himself emperor and seized all his property. No one would be able to accept this. Logically speaking, he should have charged back to the capital and questioned his brother about what he was up to. But this was not a child's play. If it was not done well, he was afraid that he would not be able to return alive. Zhu Qizhen suppressed the anger in his heart and stopped at Baoding Mansion, waiting for Yang Qindong to send back the news. In the Tumu Fortress incident, Zhu Qizhen had seen how formidable Yang Qindong was. His actions could be said to be a model example of preparing for a rainy day. This was especially true for this mercenary army. On their way here, they had killed almost all the threats in the bud. Just based on what he saw, he didn't know how many groups of Vala cavalry had been wiped out before they could discover them. Their methods were powerful, their training was thorough, and their movements were nimble. Not even the elites of the Great Ming Dynasty could compare to them. After Yang Qindong left, Zhu Qizhen had communicated with Xiao Feng many times, hoping to use this army for his own use. He had even tried to tempt them with the promise of a beautiful future. But the results were not very good. After interacting with them, he realized that this was an army that only recognized money and not people. According to Xiao Feng, as long as you gave them money, they would work for you. As for promises, they could forget about them. They were far less practical than money. Moreover, because of Zhu Qizhen's status, Xiao Feng's hiring fee was 3 times that of Yang Qindong's. In other words, for every mission, a group of 100 people would need at least 3 million taels of silver, and this was the kind that had to be paid in advance. The army had been defeated and all their weapons had been lost. Where would Zhu Qizhen find the money to support such a large expenditure? He could only think of transferring money from the national treasury after entering the capital. But now that Zhu Qiyu was the emperor, he could forget about the national treasury. This made Zhu Qizhen feel even more dejected. At one point, Zhu Qizhen even had to consider where he would go in the future. If Yang Qindong did not care about him, what would he do? He would not even have the ability to protect himself. This worry disappeared without a trace 3 days later. Chao Jixiang arrived, and with him were 3,000 embroidered uniform guards. Under the lead of Beta Persei, Chao Jixiang successfully reported to Ingzong. As soon as he saw Ingzong, he immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" At this moment, Zhu Qizhen felt a sense of superiority. He even had the thought of bringing an army to the capital to seize the throne. Just as this thought appeared, he saw Xiao Feng and the others leave. The heroic spirit that had just appeared in his heart disappeared without a trace. After seeing the strength of this mercenary army, he began to despise the embroidered uniform guards in his heart. Chao Jixiang arrived, and after seeing Ingzong and the 9 officials, he gave them a detailed account of what had happened in the capital. At the end, he even mentioned that Yang Qindong had been made a marquis and his idea of 2 emperors ruling the country. 2 emperors ruling the country? After hearing Chao Jixiang's recount, Minister of War Kuang Yi and Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua glanced at each other. How could they not know that doing this would be tantamount to splitting the Great Ming Dynasty? However, what better way was there to deal with this than now? Different from Kuang Yi and Wang Zhua, The other 7 officials were secretly happy. If Zhu Qizhen really went to Nanjing and proclaimed himself as emperor, then it was obvious that they would be promoted by 1 or even 2 ranks. For example, the right assistant minister of justice Ding Xian could become the minister of justice. The right assistant minister of works Wang Yonghe could also become the minister of works. The left assistant minister of rights Yang Shan would become the minister of rights. And the right deputy imperial censorate Deng Li would also be promoted by 1 rank and become the imperial censorate. This was a real benefit. Originally, they had lost the battle together and were prepared to be demoted or even lose their positions. Now, they could even be promoted by 1 rank. Who wouldn't be happy? After the officials received the benefits, they would naturally try to persuade Zhu Qizhen to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. Regarding this, Zhu Qizhen did not immediately make a decision. Instead, he said that he needed to think about it. Empress Qian also came. Mao Mu had taken over the role of the eunuch of Xing, and he had served the empress well and had gained her trust. In this small courtyard of Baoding Mansion, the husband and wife met. Empress Qian's tears flowed out uncontrollably. "Empress, don't cry. I'm fine." Holding Empress Qian's arm, Zhu Qizhen's face showed a rare trace of gentleness. "Well, as long as the emperor is fine, as long as the emperor is fine. I think it's better for the emperor to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. No matter what, you can be safe for a while." Empress Qian took the initiative to talk about moving south, which was completely different from her usual politics. Zhu Qizhen was very curious about Empress Qian's dissuasion. "Why does the emperor say so? Did others teach you?" "No." Empress Qian shook her head. "Your concubine has lived in the palace for a long time and has seen that the Mastiff King has managed the imperial city well, and with the assistance of eunuch Jining and the others, he now holds great power. If the emperor were to go to the capital, there would definitely be a major battle. In this case, the odds are against you." Originally, Zhu Qizhen had thought that Empress Qian had been instigated to say such words of dissuasion. Now, hearing this, Zhu Qizhen understood that the situation in the capital had truly changed. Even the empress, who rarely asked about politics, could sense it. As he cursed Zhu Qiyu, Jining, and the others for being shameless, he began to consider the matter of moving south. That night, Zhu Qizhen appeared in front of Chao Jixiang and the other officials, his face radiant. He said that he agreed to move south, but he could not let the Mastiff King off so easily. He wanted to go to the capital to ask for people and money, as well as the families of the officials, especially Crown Prince Zhu Jianxin, to be brought out of the imperial city. As long as Zhu Qizhen agreed, the other officials naturally would not object. After 2 days of discussion, they came up with a plan. In the end, Chao Jixiang led 1,000 embroidered uniform guards to escort Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo to the capital to negotiate with Zhu Qiyu. Chapter 163. The Capital. News suddenly emerged that Zhu Qizhen did not die on the battlefield. It was only a substitute for Hu Ben that had died. This news was like a gust of wind that had grown wings, quickly reaching the homes of the officials. For a moment, many of them were shocked and at a loss of what to do. 5 days after the news appeared, Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo, who had followed Ingzong to the battlefield, entered the capital under the protection of 1,000 embroidered uniform guards. Their appearance confirmed the news. Soon after, another piece of news appeared. Ingzong would not return to the capital and would instead accompany Nanjing to proclaim himself as emperor. For a time, the Great Ming would have 2 emperors ruling together. For a good country to have 2 emperors, although they were both surnamed Zhu and shared the same ancestor, it could not be considered a split. However, as time passed, the situation would naturally develop. Many far-sighted officials could see this fact. However, before they could wonder why such a change had occurred, another piece of news appeared that made them dizzy. Ingzong would need many officials to proclaim himself as emperor in Nanjing. If any of the officials in the capital were willing, they could follow Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo to Nanjing to take up their posts. Should they pledge loyalty to the current substitute Emperor Zhu Qiyu or the previous Emperor Zhu Qizhen? This was a choice that was placed in front of the officials. For a moment, Each of the officials began to make their own calculations and began to consider the gains and losses in this matter. Compared to the officials in the capital who had to make a choice about their future, Yang Chendong in the Yang family manor was very carefree. He spent his days writing and painting in the manor or improving his relationship with his women. He was extremely busy. It was worth mentioning that during these few days of rest, Yang Chendong had taken in Lady Xiang. This woman, who looked like the young 13th mistress, had a strange fragrance and an enchanting figure, which made him fall into a land of gentleness, making him feel very uncomfortable. On the other hand, although Hu Yan had a few intimate actions with Yang Chendong, she had always scrupulously adhered to her bottom line. In her words, the first time had to be reserved for the wedding night in Lulang. Yang Chendong did not insist on this. When it came to matters of the heart, he had always pursued success when the conditions were right. He would never force anyone. Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Xiao Feng returned to Yang Manor and set up a tight blockade around the perimeter. Yang Chendong, who had always attached great importance to his own safety, would never allow anyone to have the possibility of threatening his safety. Just like that, the days passed in a seemingly pleasant manner, until a guest suddenly came to visit. Yang Chendong had no choice but to welcome him personally. He even went to the entrance of the manor. It was for no other reason than the fact that the person who had come was the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, Hu Chongning, Hu Yan's father. In terms of official position, Hu Chongning could be considered Yang Chendong's subordinate, so he did not need to personally welcome him. But from Hu Yan's point of view, Yang Chendong had to personally welcome him to show his sincerity and politeness. Hu Chongning only brought Gao Sheng, a lieutenant. When the two of them successfully arrived at the entrance of Yang Manor, they saw Yang Chendong standing at the entrance. Beside him stood Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, two servants. Yang Chendong was first conferred the title of Loyal Earl by Ying Zong to thank him for saving his life on the battlefield. Then, he was conferred the title of Loyal Marquis by Dai Zong. At the same time, he also held the position of commander of the embroidered uniform guard. If the former was an empty position, then the latter was real power. He was not even 20 years old, yet he had received such an honor. This was extremely rare even when the Great Ming Dynasty was founded. Yang Chendong did it. The most important thing was that when Hu Chongning arrived, he was still able to stand at the entrance and greet him. Just this alone made Hu Chongning's originally cold face a little more gentle. Greetings to Uncle Hu. When Hu Chongning rode closer, Yang Chendong cupped his fists and greeted him with the etiquette of a junior. This showed that he did not intend to talk to him in terms of official position, which allowed Hu Chongning to avoid a lot of awkwardness. Good, the sixth young master is young and promising, making people envious. I believe that official Yang would be very gratified if he knew in the underworld. Since Yang Chendong did not greet him in terms of official position, Hu Chongning spoke in terms of human relations. When he said these words, there was no doubt that he was an elder. Haha, please. Yang Chendong smiled at Hu Chongning and then made an inviting gesture. Beta Persei took the initiative to lead the horse, and the uncle and nephew walked side by side from the entrance to the Yang clan manor. In the main hall, the guest and the host sat down, and Xiao Yin personally served tea to Hu Chongning. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at this maid who had been serving Yang Chendong since childhood. Sure enough, she was very beautiful. Seeing Xiao Yin, Hu Chongning naturally asked about his daughter. When he found out that Hu Yan had secretly left home and went to the Yang clan manor, her father was naturally furious. But at the time, Dai Zong had just ascended the throne, and because he was afraid that the officials below him would cause trouble, he was confined at home and could not go out. Later on, when the situation was not so tense, the news of Yang Chendong's return spread to the capital. Moreover, he heard that there were several storms outside the Yang clan manor, making it impossible for him to come. Finally, when the Yang clan manor had obtained a temporary peace, he took the initiative to visit. First, he wanted to see his daughter. If possible, it would be better to bring her back. After all, Hu Yan's actions at the time could be called world-shocking. Second, he wanted to ask Yang Chendong about Ying Zong's situation. More importantly, he wanted to know what choice the Hu clan would make in the dual emperor reign. When he saw Yin, Hu Zhongning opened his mouth and said, "My beloved daughter has accompanied the Yang family's seventh sister to the Yang manor for some time now. Her grandmother and mother miss her very much. Would it be possible for her to return to the Hu estate with me?" Accompanying Yang duo to the Yang clan manor was just an excuse. After all, a girl's reputation was very important. In the face of Hu Chongning's tactful request to bring Hu Yen back, Yang Chendong naturally had no reason to refuse. "Okay. Xiao Yin, go inform Yener to return to the Hu estate." Xiao Yin agreed and turned to leave. However, the bystanders couldn't see that there was a trace of reluctance on her face. Ever since Yang Chendong called the girls together and made a few requests, they became a group of fighting. They really were like sisters. They already had very deep feelings for each other. The news of Hu Chongning's arrival at the Yang clan manor quickly spread to the rear court. Hu Yen was clearly a bit out of her wits. After adapting to life in the Yang clan manor, she didn't want to go back. However, she knew that Yang Chendong had no reason to refuse her father. Xiao Yin saw that Hu Yen was worried and volunteered to serve tea in the front hall. She wanted to inquire about the news. She didn't expect that the young master would so readily agree to Hu Chongning's request. How could she not be disappointed? When Xiao Yin left and only Yang Chendong, Hu Chongning, and Tiger's Mane were left in the room, Lord Hu showed a hesitant expression. "Uncle Hu, if you have something to say, just say it. There are no outsiders here." When Yang Chendong said there were no outsiders, he naturally meant Tiger's Mane, who was always in charge of protecting him. "Haha, it's actually nothing much. I'm sure the sixth young master already knows about the dual emperor rule. However, I don't know what your choice will be. Will you go to Nanjing or continue to stay here?" Hu Chongning asked with an awkward expression. No matter what, he was a man of 40 years old. When he encountered something, it was fine if he didn't have any ideas. However, he actually wanted to ask Yang Chendong, who was much younger than him. This made him feel a little embarrassed. However, this was what his father, Hu Ming, wanted. Hu Ming's original words were, "Ask the loyal marquis whether you want to go or stay." This matter was originally caused by him. I'm sure he already has a judgment. Thus, this trip to the Yang clan manor was made. Picking up his daughter was only one of the reasons. His true goal was to find out what Yang Chendong's intentions were. "Me?" Yang Chendong pointed at himself, then chuckled. "Of course I can't leave. There's the Yang clan manor here, and there's the sky beyond heaven and the immortal abode in the capital. If I leave, I'm afraid that these properties will be seized by others." Yang Chendong expressed that he wouldn't leave, but his reason was that his properties were all here, and it wasn't convenient for him to leave. This answer clearly didn't satisfy Hu Chongning. "Haha. I'm sure the sixth young master has made quite a bit of money these days. Why would he care about this little bit of silver?" "That's true, but who in this world would complain about having too much money? Isn't that right, Uncle Hu?" Yang Chendong maintained his usual smile. It seemed incomparably sincere, but it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Yes. Hu Chongning couldn't see through Yang Chendong's thoughts, so he could only smile. But after smiling, his expression began to fluctuate. It was clear that he was wondering whether or not he should directly ask Yang Chendong what the Hu clan should do in the face of two emperors. Asking too much would only make him seem incompetent, but before he came, his father had repeatedly warned him that he had to ask Yang Chendong's intentions. If it was just for the sake of face, wouldn't he have made this trip in vain? Wouldn't he have failed to live up to his father's expectations? Hu Zhongning, who had something on his mind, looked unhappy and even had some entanglements. All of this was seen by Yang Chendong. He knew that this was his future father-in-law, so he couldn't not give him face. He smiled and took the initiative to ask, "Uncle Hu, what do you and Grandpa Hu think about the matter of two emperors?" He really didn't want to call Yang Chendong Grandpa, but given their seniority, Yang Chendong had no choice but to do so. But when he did, he still felt a little awkward. Hu Chongning hadn't thought about this. He was just worrying about how to ask this question, and now that Yang Chendong had taken the initiative to ask, he was immediately overjoyed. In truth, I would like to hear honorable nephew's opinion on this matter. I can't speak of an opinion, but if I must, I would like to give Uncle Hu 4 lines of poetry, Yang Chendong said with a smile. Chapter 164. What are the 4 sentences? Hu Zhongning's interest was piqued. Everyone said that Yang Chendong was a genius. Presumably, the following words would not disappoint him. Sure enough, after Yang Chendong pondered for a moment, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "If he is strong, then he is strong. If he is strong, then he is strong. If he is tyrannical, then he is tyrannical. The moon shines over the river." This was the record of the 9 Yang divine art in the heavenly sword and dragon saber. It meant that no matter how strong or fierce the enemy was, one could treat it as a breeze blowing over the mountain. The moon shines over the river. Although it could affect one's body, it could not cause the slightest harm. However, how could one not harm one's body? It meant that in the face of the chaos of the outside world, as long as one stayed strong and worked hard to improve one's abilities in all aspects, one would be unharmed. Hu Ming was originally a capable official and had been the Minister of Rights for many years. It could be said that he had disciples all over the world. His son, Hu Zhongning, had also grown up. With this kind of strength, whether it was following Ingzong or Daizong, there would not be any problems. As long as he stayed within his position, no one could easily touch him. Not to mention, there was also Yang Chendong helping from the side. He would not watch as something happened to the Hu family. In history, even when Ingzong ascended to the throne, until his death, Hu Ming was still firmly seated in the high position of the Minister of Rights. It was not until he was over 80 years old that he resigned from his position after Ingzong succeeded in seizing the family. From this, it could be seen that he was originally an evergreen tree in the bureaucracy. How could anyone move him just because they wanted to? Hu Zhongning did not think so much at this time. He was still repeating the 4 sentences that Yang Chendong said. After pondering over it, a smile slowly appeared on his face. Obviously, he had understood Yang Chendong's meaning. He was warning him that the most important thing was to improve his own strength. As for whether he followed Ingzong or Daizong, he could do it with ease. Many thanks. After understanding everything, Hu Zhongning immediately cupped his fist and bowed to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong naturally could not accept it. He immediately bowed back. Then, the two looked at each other and smiled. After Hu Zhongning got the result he wanted, he left. Hu Yan also left with him. When she left, her eyes were filled with reluctance. Yang Chendong felt very sorry for Hu Yan. Seeing her get into the carriage and about to leave, he suddenly cupped his fists to Hu Zhongning and said, "Uncle Hu, in a moment, nephew will send someone to the Hu estate to discuss marriage. Please allow me to marry Yan er." Hu Zhongning's expression faltered slightly upon hearing this before a look of elation appeared on his face. Good, good. I'll go back and tell father, mother, and Yenner's mother about this. Thank you for your trouble. Yang Chendong continued to thank him with cupped fists. When he looked towards the carriage, Hu Yan's face was already flushed red. It was impossible to tell if she was happy or excited. Tiger's mane saw everything. He walked up to Yang San and patted him on the shoulder. All right, the more casual young master is with you, the more he doesn't treat you as an outsider. You should be happy. Also, can't you see how busy the young master is? The wedding is near, and the young master has to personally plan and participate in everything. It's a pity that there's not much we can do to help. By the way, when the young master is celebrating, there can be no accidents. If anyone has the intention to cause trouble, there's no need to report it. Just kill them. If there's any responsibility, I'll bear it. Yes, there won't be any mistakes. Don't worry, Chief. When Yang San said this, his eyes narrowed, and a cold aura emanated from his body. Without Yang Chendong, he wouldn't be where he was today. If anyone dared to cause trouble on the wedding day, they'd definitely be tired of living. Soon, they'd become a corpse without any warmth. Yang Sen left quietly, just like how he had come. Even in the Yang manor, very few people had seen him, and even fewer people knew of him. He was also the strongest hidden chess piece in the Yang family's system. Usually, he wouldn't appear in front of everyone, but once he appeared, it often meant that something important was going to happen. Yang Chendong didn't ask when Yang San left. At this time, he was teaching the servant Yang Si how to use the camera. That's right, the camera. This was something that shouldn't appear in this era, because Yang Chendong's wedding had been taken out. If there was something good, it had to be used. Only in this way could its value be reflected. Although taking out the camera was indeed a bit too shocking, in order to leave this beautiful memory and commemoration, Yang Chendong still did it without hesitation. As soon as this camera that could capture a person's shadow appeared, it immediately attracted a lot of exclamations. If Yang Chendong hadn't been prepared, Yang Si, who had just received it, would have directly thrown it to the ground. People in ancient times were very superstitious. They believed that the shadow was also an important part of the body. They even believed that their 7 souls and 6 spirits could be hidden in it. Now that this thing could clearly capture a person's shadow and even project it, it was no wonder that people were afraid. Xiao Yin was a bit braver. Of course, this didn't mean that she wasn't afraid of anything, but because her relationship with Yang Chendong was closer than others. Naturally, this question was left to her to ask. Young master, what kind of witchcraft is this? Can capture a person's shadow. Will it turn the person who is captured into an idiot? Ah! Yang Chendong's mouth was wide open. He was stunned by the question. Yang Chendong's ability to adapt was originally very strong, but he was still defeated by this sudden and unexpected question. Seeing that Xiao Yin didn't seem to be joking and had a very serious expression, he helplessly shook his head and explained, "This is an advanced product brought about by scientific advancement. As for the specific principles, I'm afraid that young master can't explain it clearly to you. But don't worry, this thing can't capture a person's soul, so don't worry." When Yang Chendong said not to worry, Xiao Yin seemed to feel a lot more at ease. At least she dared to walk in front of the camera and even dared to make a few poses that she thought were beautiful. But the others didn't have that much courage. Every time Yang Si raised the camera and pointed it at them, there would always be a burst of chaos and shouting. It felt like a machine gun that could kill people. Wherever it aimed, people would fall to the ground. The camera was just a killing machine. In addition, Yang Chendong also took out a lot of new songs. For example, Huafeng's Big Bridal Sedan, Intimate Lover, Full Moon Flower, and the ready-made Wedding March that he had prepared beforehand. For this, he took out a set of audio equipment from the big warehouse and charged it up in the big warehouse. He was only waiting for the wedding day to use it. In addition, Yang Chendong also prepared a very luxurious carriage. The wheels were made of soft rubber tires taken from the big warehouse. There were even shock absorbers installed on the carriage to ensure its comfort. The outside of the carriage was filled with all kinds of colored balloons, making it look very beautiful and beautiful. At the same time, he also made a few sets of beautiful wedding dresses according to his own design. These were all custom-made by the Crimson City's clothing factory. The factory's director, Zhou Hua, personally supervised the completion. It was said that when making these new wedding dresses, her daughter, Luan Xiaoyu, who was the Crimson City's publicity team leader, cried because of it. Luan Xiaoyu had reached the age where she knew about feelings. She had long regarded herself as the 6th young master's woman. It was just that because she was still young, she had no chance to be Yang Chendong's wife. Seeing the man she liked was going to marry someone else, how could she not be sad? For this matter, her father Luan Qi, the director of the power plant, and mother Zhou Hua, the director of the clothing factory, talked to her for a long time. They said that a capable person like the 6th young master was destined to have more than one woman. Xiaoyu grew up quickly. When she grew up, she would naturally have the opportunity to become the 6th young master's woman. Moreover, several sets of wedding dresses were taken out. Except for one set that was sent to Hu Yan in the Hu Mansion, the others were taken away by Chaoyin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. In their words, they were also attending the wedding day. According to Yang Chendong's intention, they were going to be the bridesmaids of the bride. But in fact, They were also completing their wedding with sixth young master. In this regard, Yang Chendong acquiesced. In the feudal society, even the emperor only had one empress. It was impossible for him to have several wives at the same time, so it was impossible for him to give them a grand wedding. Therefore, it was a good thing to take this opportunity to hold all of them together. The bride had a wedding dress, and Yang Chendong prepared a suit for himself. The pure white suit was tailor-made, making Yang Chendong look more handsome and sunny. As the groomsmen, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Wu were dressed in black suits, looking very energetic. As for the several servants, Yang San, as the deputy director of the security bureau and the actual helmsman, naturally had to protect everything in the dark. Yang Lu was responsible for the security on the surface. In this way, the manpower was put to good use. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the 6th day of October, the Yang family manor was already decorated with festive decorations. Colored balls, ribbons, and bright red happy characters were posted everywhere. In front of Yang Xi's camera, amid a burst of firecrackers, the wedding procession set off just as dawn broke. Yang Chendong, dressed in a white suit, was sitting in a special carriage. Beside him were Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. Yang Wu was in charge of driving the carriage. Under the protection of Yang Lu, Qiu Vi, and Dao Xiao, they went to the capital. In the dark, Xiao Feng and Lung Feng were on guard at all times to ensure the safety of the young master. The Hu mansion in the capital was also decorated with ribbons, giving people a feeling of jubilation. Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, Madame Xiang, and the others had arrived at the Hu mansion a day in advance to accompany Hu Yen through the most difficult night before dawn. When the sky brightened, the women began to get busy and put on the new wedding dresses that had never been seen before. On the side of the road leading to the Hu mansion, there were already embroidered uniform guards standing guard. Chapter 165. After a portion of the officials left for Nanjing to follow Ingzong, the remaining officials in the capital were all restored to their original positions. Hu Zhongning was also restored to his position as the guardian of the embroidered uniform guard. In addition, Yang Chendong was still the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, so it was only natural that he would send some embroidered uniform guards to help out. Not only that, but Yang Chendong also ordered that any embroidered uniform guard who came to help out would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. For a time, the embroidered uniform guard fought amongst themselves for this mission. Those who were able to come here could be considered lucky. When the time came, the carriage from the Yang clan arrived in front of the Hu estate. Yang Chendong, dressed in a white suit, stepped out of the spacious carriage. The wedding ceremony had officially begun. The Immortal Abodes band was already waiting for Yang Chendong to arrive. The music began to play, and could be faintly heard from several streets away. Hu Yen, who was dressed like a fairy in a white wedding dress, walked up to Yang Chendong, accompanied by Qiao Yin, Madame Snow, and the bride, who were also wearing a wedding dress and looked very beautiful. Hu Yan's blushing face perfectly explained what it meant to put the moon and flowers to shame. What was different from the other women was that there were 2 children who were only 5 or 6 years old standing behind Hu Yen, a boy and a girl who looked like a golden couple. They each pulled up a corner of the white wedding dress so that the long, fluttering wedding dress would not fall to the ground, but also showed her magnanimity. There was no red veil. This was Yang Chendong's idea. After reporting this to the Hu clan, Yang Chendong received their support. Thus, Yang Chendong took the bride, Hu Yen, who could walk on her own, to the Hu clan's main hall. Here, they knelt down and kowtowed to Hu Zhongning and his wife. The completion of this step was completely recorded by the camera. From the footage, it could be seen that Hu Zhongning and Madame Shui's faces were extremely pale. It was clear that they were also frightened by the equipment that could record their figures. After paying his respects to the elders, Yang Chendong carried Hu Yen out of the Hu estate. Along the way, the courtyard was filled with all kinds of gifts that Yang Chendong had given to the Hu clan. There was no need to introduce the types of items. In short, someone had calculated the total value of these items after the event. The total value of these items was over 1,000,000 taels of silver. Just this amount alone was enough to shock countless people. This was one of the most beautiful stories in the capital, because not even the emperor would be willing to part with so many good things. From this matter, it could also be seen that Yang Chendong valued Hu Yan. The inside and outside of the immortal abode were already packed with people. In order to congratulate the patriarch on his wedding today, all the diners will have a 50% discount. Even the commoners who didn't come to the immortal abode to spend money could still enjoy the delicacies they had prepared. The premise was that the whole family had to come together. At the very least, the couple had to bring a child and bring their own lunch boxes. At that time, all the children who came would receive a delicious little pastry. The news had been released 3 days ago. By morning, the entire street in front of the immortal abode was packed with people. As a result, the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for the security of the area were given a lot more work to do. Fortunately, the people who came to receive the delicacies and pastries were all very well behaved. Some entered and some left, so there wasn't much panic. After leaving the Hu estate, the bridegroom, Yang Chendong, personally drove the carriage. Hu Yan, Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang were seated inside. Yang Chendong, who was driving the carriage, sang the bridal sedan in fear. Tiger's Mane and the others, who had long since learned how to sing, sang along loudly. When the sun comes out, I climb the mountain. When I reach the peak, I want to sing. My song floats to my little sister. When she hears my song, she smiles. Yang Chendong's cheerful voice rang out. Sitting in the spacious and comfortable carriage, Hu Yan and the other girls were filled with happiness. As they looked at the brightly colored balloons around the carriage, their faces were brimming with happiness. The carriage passed through the streets of the immortal abode. Along the way, one new song after another could be heard. All of them were joyous songs that suited the occasion, and the people who had come along to watch the show all cheered with joy. As they passed through the streets of the immortal abode and saw the crowded streets, Hu Yan and the other girls smiled at each other. This was the young master doing a good deed, as well as accumulating good karma. Although he had to spend some money to do so, in the eyes of the girls, the significance of this action was far more profound. The carriage finally left the capital, and under the protection of the embroidered uniform guards, it headed for the Yang clan manor. At this time, there were all sorts of carriages and bridal sedan chairs waiting outside the Yang clan manor. Many officials of the court were waiting here for the bridegroom to arrive. He had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, less than 2 years. However, Yang Chendong had used his own efforts to prove his strength. With money and power, who wouldn't give him this little bit of face? And this wasn't even mentioning the fact that he was marrying the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao. Under the witness of many honored guests, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's arm and led her to the main hall of the Yang clan manor, where the two principals were already seated. Yang Chendong and his wife were no longer present, so the ones presiding over Yang Chendong's wedding were his big brother Yang Gong and big sister Yang Fei. The entire Yang clan had come to Yang Chendong's wedding, and even his second brother Yang Rang was in the crowd. However, it was clear that his complexion was rather unsightly. He had originally believed that with his sixth brother dead, he, as the second brother, would be able to openly take over the family property. He hadn't expected that Yang Chendong would return, and in such a domineering manner, and even be conferred the title of Valiant Marquis. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable, and Yang Rang had lost a great deal of face. For Yang Chendong's wedding, he had invited all the members of the Yang clan, including all the important ministers in the capital, but his second brother didn't send anything. This had already proved Yang Chendong's attitude. Even so, Yang Rang still came by himself. He knew that this might be an opportunity to change the relationship between himself and his sixth brother. In the main hall, Yang Gong was on the left and Yang Chendong was on the right, accepting the kneeling ceremony of Hu Yanxing, his new daughter-in-law. Under the insistence of Yang Chendong, they only completed the first bow to heaven and earth, and the second bow to the parents. As for the third step of entering the bridal chamber, it was cancelled. According to Yang Chendong, women didn't just stay at home to take care of their husbands and children. They could also do many other things that they liked to do. This was also called the liberation of women. Since it was liberation, then he would start with his wife. After communicating with Hu Yen in advance, and knowing that she didn't want to enter the bridal chamber so early and wait for a long time, he agreed to her request and allowed her to change into a beautiful qipao. Then, she reappeared in front of everyone and toasted the guests with him. When the ceremony reached this point, it was time for the wedding banquet to begin. For the important ministers, the banquet was also a part of their work. There were many things that were difficult to say and difficult to do, but they were often easily done with the passing of a cup. Yang Qindong's wedding gave everyone an opportunity to interact. For a moment, the ministers came and went, and it was very lively. However, this liveliness reached a climax when the bride, Hu Yen, and the 3 other women changed into decent qipeos and appeared. Yang Qindong announced in front of everyone that today was not only the day he married Hu Yen, but also the day he took Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang as his concubines. After listening to Yang Qindong's announcement, the 3 women, who were completely unaware before, were so excited that their faces turned red. They originally thought that they were very happy to be able to follow Dong Shui. With their status, they didn't dare to ask for anything. However, they didn't expect that happiness would come to them so quickly and so suddenly. In response, Hu Yen looked at them with a smile. She wasn't surprised at all. Obviously, she already knew about this news and must have agreed. Otherwise, Yang Qindong wouldn't do such a thing in public. He was marrying his wife and concubines on the same day. Although this kind of thing had happened before, most of the protagonists who did it were extremely desolate. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Qindong wasn't someone who was muddle-headed. At this point, the general public thought that it was normal for emperors to have many wives and concubines. They also thought that it was natural, and believed that China's ancient people practiced polygamy. However, this wasn't the case. Many modern people learned about ancient China through media such as movies, or web novels. At the same time, they often defined the social environment and culture of that era through the interpretation of the drama. Therefore, when the dramas performed were like the hotly discussed palace dramas such as Zhan Huan Zhuan, Rui Zhuan, Yanxi Strategy, and Do You Know It? The general public would easily take the situation of the emperor and his ministers having many wives and concubines as a matter of course, and believe that the ancient Chinese people practiced polygamy. In fact, what we don't know is that China's marriage model since ancient times was mainly monogamy, and not the stereotypical polygamy and monogamy. The Great Ming Society's archives number 163 clearly recorded the punishment for those who violated the law. For ordinary people, if they have a wife but still marry her, they will be flogged 90 times and divorced. If they are over 40 years old and have no children, they will be allowed to marry concubines. Violators will be flogged 40 times. However, the rules weren't absolute. Very few people would take concubines. However, those who took concubines were mainly those with high social status. In other words, the higher the status, the more concubines they would take. Therefore, the imperial family naturally had the most concubines, followed by the important officials and the rich. Commoners rarely had the opportunity to take concubines. Therefore, taking concubines was considered a privilege in China's traditional culture. In the Great Ming Society's archives number 57, it clearly stated that taking concubines, as well as the number of concubines, had to be investigated by the Ministry of Rights. The heir and the prince had 4 concubines. The eldest son and the general had 3 concubines. It was true that Yang Qindong was the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, so taking in 3 concubines wasn't that much of a violation of the rules. However, why didn't he mention it in advance? Since no one knew about it, didn't that mean that this matter wasn't reported to the Ministry of Rights? You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.